Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board. This is the regular meeting of the Select Board for September 22nd, 2020. This meeting, as all meetings during the health emergency, is being remotely conducted using the Zoom meeting platform. It is also being recorded. A quorum of the Select Board is participating from their respective remote locations. So at this time, I'd like to move that the Select Board go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining and negotiation issues. As as the Chair of the Select Board, hereby declare that an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the negotiation position of the town. We will return after our executive session to open session. So all in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So Devin put us into executive session.
At this time, I'm going to ask the three attendees if they could voluntarily leave the meeting. Unfortunately, if I have to remove you, you won't be able to rejoin with this email address.
Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is the regular meeting of the Select Board for September 22nd, 2020. We are meeting through using the Zoom platform due to the coronavirus emergency. All of our board members are attending the meeting on Zoom remotely, and the meeting is being recorded. Let's see. So I'd like to start off with a few announcements and a statement from myself, and other board members can chime in afterwards. So on Friday, we lost a giant among Americans and the world, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There's been a lot of talk about her significance on the court, Supreme Court, on many issues. I always like to find something in a person's life or their words that can guide me and others in our present situation. In 2019 at Amherst College, she asked the audience, what's the difference between a bookkeeper in New York's garment district, her mother, and a Supreme Court justice? The difference, she said, is one generation. Many of us can relate to that question, because one generation back from us, our parents, grandparents, were not doing the things and achieving the things that we are. The guidance I take from that quote is that how we treat the least among us will determine whether we have so much, it will determine whether we who have so much and those who don't have anything will have a better world tomorrow. The bookkeeper or the single mother or the homeless person or the immigrant hiding from ICE are all more significant to all of us than they may appear today. They are the generation that will produce the next generation that could change the world if, but only if, we make sure that those people and their children have the means to achieve their greatness. So those are my thoughts on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'm sure other people have thoughts. We're entering into a difficult and dark period with her passing and other things going on in America. But we have to keep our eyes on the prize and make sure that we do what's right and as we go forward. Next, I'd like to read a statement regarding our executive session. I'm pleased to report that in our earlier executive session, the Select Board reviewed and approved by a vote of 3-2 a memorandum of agreement with the Brookline Police Union, which includes an agreement on the deployment of body cameras, dashboard cameras, and GPS systems. The agreement requires further bargaining over the terms and conditions of the program. The union has waived its right to require the town to bargain over the decision to deploy this new technology. The board is eager to begin bargaining over those terms and conditions, and we will of course look for the input from various committees of the town looking into these matters to help the board and staff determine the right program for Brookline. The memorandum of agreement will now proceed to the special town meeting on November 17, where it must be approved by that body under what's going to be warrant article 2 of the warrant. So that's good news in my opinion, and we'll go forward with that. Now, next, I want to bring up another matter that has been burning up social media over the past few days. It's a difficult item, but I'm going to raise it and we can have a discussion on it. I know that we're going to have public comments on it. Last week at the Policing Reform Committee, I made a gesture when introducing the topic of a chokehold ban that was juvenile and interpreted as me as not seeing the issue of chokeholds as a serious matter, which of course I do. Once I became aware that I had made this gesture, when a video clip began circulating on social media, I prepared and circulated a statement, and I'd like to just read that statement now. Nothing has changed. There is a video circulating showing me treating chokeholds in an inappropriate, joking manner. That was a lapse, and I apologize. I know, like many things in Brookline, it will be weaponized, and I will have to deal with that. But you should know that the proposal to ban chokeholds was initiated by me in June, and I have been the person working to include a ban in the police department's use of force policy since then. My proposed ban on chokeholds was adopted with minor edits by the Policing Reform Committee at its September 16 meeting. I take this issue very seriously, which is why I've been pushing for it for such a long time. In the beginning, alone. It is not a joking matter, and I will continue this work until we have a chokehold ban in Brookline. I think it's also important to say that words and gestures can be harmful to people, even if not intended to be so. I am aware of the reality that police violence against Black people in faraway places can have an impact on Black people and others in Brookline. I know it's had an impact on, well, me, but also my son. My gesture could have brought up negative memories and feelings for people who were affected by those images, or who may have had negative experiences with the police in Brookline or elsewhere. For that also, I give my humble apology. I don't expect that anything that I say will satisfy some of the people who are clamoring for my head. Rather, I'm speaking to those people in our community who haven't forgotten the things that I have done for this community during my time on the select board and before, and who believe that their response to my misstep must be proportionate to the crime and not be used as an opportunity to further deepen the divisions in our community. I will continue with the important work that we have before us on the select board and on the various committees of the town in which I serve, including the select board committee on policing reform. So that's my statement. If other members of the board have statements, please, or updates, please say them now. I want to also mention that June Binney, who's a member of our committee, was also caught up in this situation and has been attacked on social media. She will also have a statement that will be read at tomorrow. I assume she will read at the meeting of the Policing Reform Committee tomorrow. So with that, any other announcements, updates, or statements?
I'm happy to go, sure.
Okay.
First, I do want to, as it relates to the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, want to express my deep sorrow at the loss of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was a superhuman, one of the greatest among us, who brought us closer to the ideals of equal justice under the law, and in particular, gender, sexual, and racial equality. Her life, extraordinary, legendary, and well-lived, is a reminder of the impact one person can have on the rest of us. It calls out to us all to stand up and advocate for those who need it most. So my sincere condolences to the family of Justice Ginsburg and to the grateful nation that mourns the loss of this titan. May she rest in power. Now, to the other matter that the chair just brought up, and we've talked a few times, and I made some remarks Friday at our task force meeting. It's a separate task force to reimagine policing. So I want to share some remarks on this today, and frankly, a lot of this is directed to the select board itself, but also to members of the public. I first commented on this, as I mentioned, on Friday at the task force to reimagine policing in Brookline. I should note, because there's understandably some confusion by members of the public, that the task force, which I chair, is separate from the Committee on Policing Reforms, which is currently chaired by Mr. Green. Both, of course, are bodies appointed by and overseen by the select board. And so I speak today in my oversight role as a select board member. I will note, as Mr. Green did, that he did in the moment apologize and acknowledge that his actions weren't funny. Which is an understatement, of course, to say the least, and has since, as he mentioned, apologized for what he called a lapse and inappropriate. If the chair's actions were merely inappropriate, I think that would be a different conversation. In my view, the chair's behavior was egregious, unconscionable, unacceptable, and inexcusable. As I said on Friday, that kind of callous behavior would not be tolerated on our task force. And while I can't imagine that anyone in that group would do anything so disturbing, I made it clear that if they did, that would be their last meeting with us. The same should hold true for the Committee on Policing Reforms. To my fellow select board members, this is a matter of principle. The public needs to know that we in our committees on reform and reimagining understand the seriousness of this work and the existential threat that the current state of affairs poses to Black people and others. Allowing someone who has joked about chokeholds to continue to chair a committee on police reform both erodes the public trust and undermines the seriousness of the committee's task. Mr. Green's lack of understanding of the gravity of his error and its impact on this work is further evidence that unless he decides tonight to do the right thing and step aside, the select board should act to immediately remove him from the responsibility of chairing this committee. This isn't all personal and it has nothing to do with cancel culture. Mr. Green will still be a member and chair of the select board, I imagine. But for the moment, and for this important work to have any credibility, he simply cannot be associated with it. Select board members, this is not easy, but it is gut check time. Where do you draw the line? How seriously do you take this work? And how seriously should Brookline residents take your express commitments to racial justice and to police reform or reimagining? It's clear to me that the chair's behavior was egregious and disqualifying, at least as it relates to him chairing the reform committee. I hope you'll agree. Brookline deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So, I was disturbed and disappointed, but I've certainly said things that I wish had not come out of my mouth. So I will try to understand that we are human. I am moved by Select Board Member Raoul's comments. I would really like to hear from the Reform Committee to see if they feel comfortable with the chair still being part of that work. So I am not at this time comfortable removing Chairman Green until I hear from the committee members.
Okay, anyone else?
I would like to speak. I think Heather raised an important question, which I too am, awaiting that further development. I think we have to respect excuse me, the subcommittees, I keep calling it a subcommittee. It's not a subcommittee. The Committee on Police Reform that Chair Green chairs, at any time can make its own decisions as to leadership. And I would always respect those decisions. And we haven't heard from them yet. And so I think it's important to hear from them, and that too may affect decisions going forward. But we haven't heard from them yet. I did listen in on a meeting of a subcommittee of that committee, also chaired by our chair, Bernard Green. And I wish that everyone would have listened to that subcommittee's meeting a couple of days ago. They had the kind of open and honest and heartfelt, sometimes gut-wrenching discussion of the remarks that he made, the remark that he made. It was one remark in a very short span of time, very inappropriate, immediately apologized for, but clearly painful to large numbers of people. And this subcommittee confronted it. They had their discussion of it. They expressed in at least one instance, because there's an individual on that subcommittee who herself has been held up to, I'll call it public shaming and scorn for the fact that she briefly laughed in response to the light moment that Chair Green immediately apologized for. And she also, at the time, immediately said, of course it's not funny. Or at least that's my recollection of it, is that she clearly indicated, as Chair Green himself said immediately, this is not a laughing matter. And yet she's had to deal with the very difficult consequences of a brief moment of laughing in response to his very light laughter. It's not like he was overindulging in making fun of something that clearly is serious. It brought a smile to his face. He immediately recognized that the smile was inappropriate, apologized. She laughed in response, and I think, if I remember the meeting correctly, immediately indicated that, of course, she as well did not think that this was appropriate. And they talked about it, and they shared with one another, and they worked out what it meant to them to have to see that during a meeting, and what it meant to them to have to decide the effect of that on their ability to serve as a committee. And in the end, they went forward, and they are going to do good work. And the Police Reform Committee is going to do good work. Anyone who's watched them, I think, would come to that same conclusion. They're serious. They are knowledgeable and experienced people. They're dealing with the issue. They had a bad moment as a result of this, as Chair Green himself said. It's a juvenile remark to make. It caused pain. But I think that we will find out for sure when the other members of that committee have had a chance to weigh in, if it in fact is of such a consequence that the committee cannot do its work. And until we find that out, I just want to say that this has been painful for so many people, and painful as well to think that we can't get beyond this. I think we can get beyond this. I respect Bernard Green immensely. I never thought from the moment this happened that it was appropriate, but I never thought that he would be held to such a difficult standard here of not being allowed to go on as he has throughout his life and prove his value on this issue and other issues. I hope in the end, he does have that chance, both as chair of that committee and of course, as continuing as our chair. And I know he will continue to do good work. He always has, he always will.
Thank you.
Can I just
Ms.
add
Heller?
one quick thing?
Yes.
Yeah. So I agree with what John has just said, and I agree with some of what Heather has said. You know, Bernard made a mistake. We talked about it. He acknowledged it. He acknowledged it immediately. I think if any of us, you know, I've lived my life in Brookline in the spotlight for many years. I've made mistakes and I've been ashamed of those mistakes and upset about them. But I couldn't let it bog me down in terms of the work I wanted to get done. And we should not allow this to bog down Chair Green or the committees and the causes that he works for. He's done an enormous amount for the town and certainly been on the side of improving the situation for minorities in this community and everywhere. And I value that work and I'm glad he's doing it. And I would not want to disrupt it. I really think that he can be effective, especially since he understands what the mistake that he made, and he feels a lot of remorse for that. And I think that is a critical piece. If he were just to laugh it off again and no, you know, it's nothing, it's a different thing, but he didn't. And I think that in the Jewish calendar, this is a time for atonement of your sins and to forgive people who have committed sins against you. And that's what I intend to do.
Thank you.
I do have one announcement.
Yes.
If,
No, we're at announcements now.
Okay. So I am also a member of the Brookline Rotary Club, and they are putting on a program that will be on October 7th, virtually at 7:30 p.m. It is about COVID-19. They're calling it COVID-19, the real science. They're going to have some very impressive speakers, and they've asked me to moderate. So I do hope we'll visit either their Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Brookline Rotary. I understand Big is covering it. So you can tune in to Channel 3 or go on brooklineinteractive.org/live at 7:30 on October 7th, which I believe is a Thursday.
Thank you.
I'd
Any other
like,
announcements out
yes,
there?
I would like to make my usual pitch about the
Usual
census.
important pitch.
About the census. We're coming to the end of the period. September 30th is it. This week, the census is very busy in Brookline. Mel announced a few days ago that we had received a grant from the Secretary of State, Bill Galvin, to supplement the help town employees working for the census so that we can get more and more people signed up. And they're going to be doing this through their mobile assistance questionnaire units, where they go to areas, hopefully with high pedestrian traffic, and they let people know that they're there. They have handheld devices, and people who have not filled out the census can give the information to a census worker and get it filled out. The town employees will be assisting by directing people to the tables, by passing out the palm cards, and giving other people information about where they could do it online. And that will cut down the time so that hopefully the census workers themselves could sign more and more people up. They'll be going to all of the food pantries this week, as they have been in the past, the farmers market, which has been very successful, as they have in the past. And we're trying to add some other venues, including parks and high pedestrian walking areas, like the space between Kent and Riverway on Longwood, where the many hospital workers travel. They walk to work that way. We're looking at other places, Trader Joe's, Stop and Shop, you know, and so we're going to try to utilize as much as we can of the census help that we can get to boost our numbers. Our numbers have gone up in the last couple of weeks by 1.5%, which is good. That's great. It's just not enough. And so I urge you to, if you don't feel like going online or calling on the telephone, go to the farmers market, and you know you'll encounter the census workers on the sidewalk there and at tables. You can just talk to a real person and do it that way. If you're not, you want to go to my2020census.gov and follow the instructions. It's in many languages, and it's really, really critical for the town in terms of federal and state funding for the future. So we hope you will all take advantage of the opportunity to do it before September 30th.
Thank you. And let me just add, we have 8 days left to December 30th. And unfortunately, we've been given this deadline artificially by certain powers in this country who don't want people counted. Look through your address book, see if you know people who are likely to have not gone to the census or likely not to have been counted. I mean, there are a variety of reasons that even at this late date, people would not be counted. I mean, for example, it's not just, young people or people who are poor or this, that, and the other, or immigrants. It could be some doctors on the at the Longwood Health Center or area who are just so incredibly busy that things like this fall through by the wayside. So if you know people in any status in their lives, please reach out to them and see if we can get 2 or 3 individuals per person listening in to this meeting to sign up and get counted for the census. I mean, it's a small thing that those of us or those people listening in tonight can do, but it is still very, very important. So those are my 2 cents. Any other announcements, updates, comments? Okay, Devin, this is public comment period. I want to just make a note that there is an organized effort to get people to speak at public comment on the issue that I discussed earlier, including making demands for my resignation from various positions and the disbanding of the Policing Reform Committee. There will also be expressions of support for the work that I do and the work of the Policing Reform Committee. So let's bring it on. I want to give a little extra time, but let's limit it to 30 minutes and ask people to spend just 3 minutes per comment so that we can get on to the other business of this meeting.
Chairman Green, before we get started, I did want to let you know that we have at this time 12 people signed up, which brings us to 36 minutes. Do you want to honor those signups or bring it just to the 30 minutes?
No, let's honor the signups. I mean, 6 additional minutes is not going to kill us.
Okay, so that's 12 people in total. The list begins with Jonathan Mandy and ends with Joanna Klein. I will introduce everyone prior to their public comment period. Jonathan, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin when you are ready.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all having a great Tuesday so far. Thank you for having me on. So I'm just going to start with saying, my name is Jonathan Monday, and I am a member of the Committee for Policing Reforms, a former Florida Ruffin Ridley and Brookline High School student. 21 years ago, I had the privilege of immigrating to Brookline from the Democratic Republic of Congo to grow up here. In the subsequent years following my arrival, I grew to love my town and its people. And because I love this place so much, it is therefore imperative to speak the truth in love. As leaders, it is essential to be mindful of the way we speak. We must not be obnoxious with facts or personally offensive in the way we approach others. Instead, we must communicate in a way that the manner of our speech or speaking is honoring and respectful. We live in an unprecedented time of changes in the world around us, and Brookline is not immune. But for change to occur, we must first identify and acknowledge the deep systemic issues of leadership we have in our town, starting with the select board. Following the shootings of unarmed Black men in our town, or in our country rather, it took weeks for the members of the select board to agree on Dr. Raul Fernandez's proposal to reimagine public safety in Brookline. In June, the Brookline Police Union proceeded to attack Vice President Bob Miller of the Brookline Education Union, citing that he turned his back on the BPU by supporting to defund the local police department. The BPU's public statement accused Mr. Miller of wanting to hurt the community and lay off minority police officers. So why is it that defunding the police department would result in laying off minority officers? How can that occur?
30 seconds.
As people who love our town unconditionally, it is crucial to that we have discernment in who we hire and elect for leadership roles across town. In the words of Charles Spurgeon, discernment is not knowing the difference between right and wrong. It is knowing the difference between the right and almost right. I don't believe we will get it perfect, but we must identify and remove the wolves in sheep's clothing among us. It is now more than ever before, we must ensure a future that our children and their children will be proud of. This is our time. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Lena OLeary. Lena, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video when you're comfortable.
Thank you so much for your time. So my comment is somewhat of a different topic. I'm a resident in Brookline, and I live next to the Walgreens on Harvard Ave. Harvard Ave with Aspen Wall, and we've had an issue with rats for several years. This year, it has gotten much worse. We are dealing with rats constantly on our backyard. We have holes, and now we are dealing with the dead rats underneath our stairs, decomposing, which are causing horrible odors and a severe health hazard to those in the house. I've been working with the health inspectors for months now, and unfortunately their techniques are just not being efficient. They've tried to control the overflow of the Walgreens trash, so their trash is basically adjacent to our backyard. So because of the trash, the rats are constantly on our backyard. Their efforts have not been sufficient. They've been trying to control the overflow of trash, and they've put exterminator boxes on our backyard, but the issue is getting worse and worse, and it is becoming a health hazard. So I'd like to start a petition to have Walgreens move their trash away from Brookline residencies to protect Brookline residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Kleckner, can't the health department step in and require that? I mean, it seems to me that if the trash is overflowing, that's must be a violation of some health regulation.
So it's currently, the overflow has been somewhat controlled by the inspectors, but the issue is getting worse. So
Okay.
I think that it's not only an issue of the overflow, but it has to be removed from our backyard. It's like we have a tiny wall, like it's just like it's
Yeah,
a wood
got it.
wall separating our
I'll
backyard.
follow up with the health department tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Let me know, and we'll get back to you sometime.
I appreciate
Lee, contact the select board office and let Devin Williams know how to contact you. Thanks.
The next person signed up for public comment is Deborah Brown. Deborah, you have been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video when you're comfortable, and then your 3 minutes will begin.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Deborah Brown. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 1. I've heard a fair amount of discussion tonight about how people make mistakes. No one here is asking anyone to be held to a standard of perfection. What we're talking about here is a standard by which we should judge all people. Bernard should resign, pure and simple. Leadership matters, and it matters no matter where you live. But in a time of 2020, when George Floyd's body is not cold in the grave, the man yelled out for his mother. He yelled, "I can't breathe." And then the chair of a committee that deals with police reform makes a mocking choking action and laughs, and then he catches himself, and that's enough. I say no. I say everybody in Brookline deserves far better than Bernard's behavior. It was horrible, it was horrific, it was traumatizing. I cannot believe he did it, and there's no reason, absolutely no reason, to pretend like it was anything less than what we saw. I can't trust Bernard based on what he's done. I can't trust him to act in the best interest of the community. We have to hold Bernard to the same standard that we would hold a Brookline High student. If a Brookline High student did that, I have a good feeling he or she would be suspended, they'd be suspended. Let the committee do its work. This committee, and I listened in, they're pushing Bernard. Bernard's not leading, he may be in that chair, but he's not driving the reforms that the members of that committee are working hard to do. He is a stain on that committee. It will be illegitimate as long as he sits there. Now, this is a comment to the people that are so willing to defend Bernard.
You have 30 seconds.
Select board, I want you to think of yourself as Atticus Finch's. Atticus Finch tells his daughter Scout, "Oh, so-and-so's a good man, just had a blind spot like the rest of us." Was his blind spot was being a member of the Ku Klux Klan and killing people. You know, Atticus is a champion for comfort and not equality. And when you sit there and you pronounce that Bernard is good, he's hardworking, you're not looking through it. You're not looking at it through the lens of a person of color.
I'm 3 minutes.
Looking at it through the lens of any disadvantaged person. And so you need to question how you consider race in this community. So I thank you, but Bernard should resign. And I hate to be the person saying this, but it's for the good of people of color. It's for the good of this community. He did this. He did it all by himself. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Janelle O'Neill. Janelle, when you're ready, your 3 minutes will begin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Donald O'Neill Sr. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 4. Brookline Village. I'm also on the advisory committee. I'm speaking for myself as a resident of Brookline, person of color who has lived in this town for over 41 years. Now, I grew up in a church called 12th Baptist Church in Roxbury, Massachusetts. It's a place where Martin Luther King met his wife, Coretta. Actually, Louis Farrakhan used to play his flute there at that church before he became a Muslim. Michael Dukakis was best friends with the pastor of my church, Michael E. Haynes. I say all this to you because I've seen real leaders. I've seen them in action. I've seen them lift people up and never put them down, not even in a joking manner. When I saw the meeting and I went through it over and over again, I was praying it was a joke. I was hoping that this wasn't real. But it was. It was disappointing. It felt like a taunt to everyone who looks like Bernard and myself. It was very disappointing, and that's not how a leader needs to represent himself. A leader who makes a mistake would step down. A leader who feels bad, sincerely, about what they did would hear the people who he's supposed to be representing step down. The work on that reform committee can be done without Bernard sitting on that board. It's not a financial impact that he wants to put forth at chokehold. So I just feel as a leader, Bernard, man, I've always tried to support you, man, and there was no time in the meeting where it was cool for you to do with Bernard.
You've reached 30 seconds.
And pull a joke out because you were awkward, it was uncomfortable. There was no uncomfortable moment in that whole meeting, man, until you made it uncomfortable. I would ask that you resign, man, be a leader. Resign, step down. You hurt a lot of people. You might not think so, but you did. Just please resign, man. Be a real leader. You can unmute me now. Thank you.
Okay.
The next person signed up for public comment is Ryan Black. Ryan, your 3 minutes will begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Deb. Good evening, Select Board. Ryan Black, he, him, of Brookline Budget Justice. I just want to say I fully endorse and support everything Deborah Brown said. I fully agree, but I have my own thoughts that I'll go into now. So for starters, the Select Board is the executive branch of the town. So this is addressed to Select Board members Hamilton and Van Scoyac. You are the authority which provides oversight over this reform committee. You each need to decide for yourselves if this behavior, which has caused the public to lose trust in this reform committee, you need to decide if that disqualifies Chair Green from being a part of this work. Don't punt. You can't punt. And I construe, I'm saying, well, let's see what the reform committee says. Like, that's punting. No, make a decision for yourselves. But to go into the main part of my remarks, I want to be clear about Chair Green's joke, of which he has apologized for, was the most viral moment from the reform committee's meetings. It wasn't the only moment illustrative of the committee's profound issues. Well, I believe that some of the reform committee's members are sincerely committed to changing policing for the better. But unfortunately, they are vastly outnumbered by those who reflexively defend the police department and frankly are actively there to prevent change. For example, any discussion too critical of the Brookline police is quickly shut down. I recall one instance where Jonathan Mandy made some really good points, and Bernard's response was to essentially go, well, we must weigh that with positive information, and we must think about how this affects the police department's morale, which Come on, that cannot be the most salient points in this discussion. Sorry, I'm just silencing my phone. Several members of the committee also seem to think that what the police department needs is better PR. Many members of this committee, and I don't think this is a malicious decision, but it's speaking of where they're coming from. They clearly see their role like, oh, we just need to improve the police department's reputation because there's really nothing fundamentally wrong. And again, I'm not saying that to imply maliciousness, but that's just where they're coming from. They don't see how deep the problems are. And during the discussion on chokehold bans, I'm speaking about after the joke, Chair Green would also make two admissions. A chokeholds ban's value may largely be symbolic.
You've reached 30 seconds.
And that it knows even when a municipality bans the technique, cops still use it. And so it's like, why is this reform committee spending so much time talking about something it knows is symbolic? That to me just says it's really only interested in symbolic change. But just one more paragraph. But the reform committee's problems really go beyond its membership too, and what its members are saying. Its mission to improve policing as it currently exists was wrong from the start. We have to look.
You've reached 3 minutes.
Limit the size and scope of this institution. Just one more sentence. We have to limit the size and scope of police as an institution wherever possible, while pursuing an expanded definition of public safety that includes all human beings need to thrive. And that's reimagining. Reform's just not going to cut it. Thank you for letting me go over. I'm done.
The next person in line for public comment is Ann Weaver. Ann, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin when you're ready.
Hi, thanks. I'm going to stop the video because my connection is pretty wonky right now. Hang on. So my name is Ann Weaver and I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 11 in Brookline. I'm also a member of Dr. Fernandez's Reimagining Police Task Force. I'd like to use my public comment time today to provide additional context around this recent offensive chokehold gesture and subsequent semi-apology by Chair Green. Chair Green has had a long, amicable relationship with the Brookline PD. Indeed, the Brookline Police Union endorsed Mr. Green when he ran for select board. When police officers Prentice Pilot and SD Zarai Miskan asked the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission for their help in their complaint of racism by other police officers, Mr. Green, who was the select board liaison to the Diversity Commission, did nothing to help them. Last year, in a select board meeting, Chair Green had no reaction when approximately 30 off-duty police officers, many of them armed and in uniform, stood in the meeting room during an 18-year-old's public hearing of his complaints against the police. Chair Green did nothing about this clear attempt at intimidation by police. When anonymous members of the police union in Brookline used social media to name and attack 3 Brookline residents of color and a white civil rights attorney, Chair Green did nothing in response. Recently, Chair Green declared that there is, quote, a victory of policing in Brookline, end quote. In addition, Chair Green has stated concern that talk of reforming or reimagining the police is bad for police morale. This is the context for Chair Green's cavalier joke about Black Americans being choked to death by police. Finally, in reaction to calls for accountability, Bernard Green's response was to accuse Brookline residents of, quote, weaponizing, end quote.
You have 20 seconds.
A clip of his own actions. That's not an apology. If he had laughed and made a stabbing motion as he chaired a task force on domestic violence or sexual assault, Would it be okay to accuse constituents of weaponizing their reactions? In closing, this is not a one-time error of judgment by Chair Green in relationship to police behavior and intimidation. Last week's chokehold joke was
3 minutes.
the most recent example of why Chair Green should not be a member of the Police Reform Committee and, in my opinion, should step down from the Select Board. He has gone too far to continue to be a respected member of Brookline town government. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Amy Takanami. You've been promoted to a panelist and you can unmute. Your 3 minutes will begin when you are ready.
Hi, Amy Takanami, she, her, hers. I live in precinct 10 and I'm a Brookline High School class of 2012. I'm also a co-founder of Brookline for Racial Justice and Equity and a member of Brookline Budget Justice. Like many others tonight, I want to express my extreme disgust in the actions of Select Board Chair Bernard Green during a recent Police Reform Committee meeting where Mr. Green introduced the topic of the chokehold ban by mimicking a choking action and laughing. This callous action, imitating the murder of people at the hands of the police, such as Eric Gardner and George Floyd, should absolutely be disqualifying regarding Mr. Green's continued role on the Police Reform Committee. How can the people of Brookline, particularly people of color, trust the intentions and leadership of this committee if its leader can display such an abhorrent disregard for the people murdered by police chokeholds across this country? And while Mr. Green has since apologized for his actions, I think it's important that we understand that this was not an isolated mistake, but just the most appalling manifestation of the entire attitude and intent of the leadership of the Police Reform Committee. At no step in this process has the leadership of the committee shown the slightest interest in truly interrogating the ways the Brookline Police Department act with the same callous violence that ignited an uprising across cities and towns nationwide. I don't believe Chairman Green made this repugnant joke because he finds the idea of people murdered by police funny. I do believe it instead reveals the extent to which he believes Brookline is somehow divorced from the systemic racism inherent in American society and the institution of policing. An issue ostensibly so distant from our community that he can laugh at it as some abstraction instead of a reality that has and will continue to terrorize and murder Black and Brown community members in this town and beyond. How can the Police Reform Committee expect us, the people of Brookline, to believe they are acting in good faith when their leader plainly entered into the committee without the slightest intention of taking serious action? For what purpose did we all believe this committee was formed other than to placate our community with symbolic gestures, act as the personal PR department for the Brookline Police Department, and stymie the task force for reimagining policing and any meaningful actions they might pursue? Plainly stated, the Police Reform Committee cannot continue as currently constructed. The resignation of Mr. Green is not even the minimum required to repair public faith in this institution. If this committee is to continue, it must be reconstituted with a leader who will take the issue of police violence seriously.
You have 30 seconds.
And not a matter for laughter. If it cannot do so, it must be disbanded. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Josh Anyaosa. He is not in the attendee list at this time, so I've promoted Emily Chen and we'll look out for him if he is able to join us. Emily, you've been promoted to a panelist and your 3 minutes will begin when you're ready.
Hi, Select Board. My name is Emily Chen and I'm a recent Brookline High graduate and I live in Precinct 14. Today, I want to revisit why Brookline created these two task forces, one to reimagine policing and one on police reform in the first place. While I initially gave Select Board the benefit of the doubt and hoped that you created these committees out of genuine urgency and obligation to confront the ways in which Brookline police belong to an inherently racist system, Chairperson Bernard Green's offensive conduct has demonstrated this isn't the case. Green's chokehold joke and admission that a chokehold ban would largely bring about symbolic, let's call it ineffective, change, only corroborate our town's tendency in response to unacceptable acts of racism to draw up committees that then enforce the status quo. I ask that you prove this wrong. Prove that you aren't indifferent. Prove that you care to confront racist behavior in Brookline. Prove that you listen to your Black residents and visitors who are disproportionately stopped in traffic, who are criminalized for daily tasks like walking outside, who are, time and time again, discriminated against by Brookline police. Demand that the police budget is made transparent and accessible. disband the reform task force, which at best operates counterproductively by its reluctance to examine town police critically, and redirect attention to the reimagining task force. When it's time for the reimagining task force to present its findings and make the recommendations that it believes would effectively create some real change, take their charges seriously and devote your resources to realizing them. Thank you. I yield my time.
Okay, next.
Emma Nash is the next person signed up for public comment. Emma, you've been promoted, and when you're ready, your 3 minutes will begin.
Hi, my name is Emma Nash. I live in Washington Square, and I'm an organizer with Brookline Budget Justice. Listening to the discussion of what our response should be to Chair Green's offensive remarks at the Policing Reforms Committee meeting, I kept thinking back to the discussion we had over the discussion we had of the membership of this committee back in July and August, when members of this board repeatedly raised the point that police officers should probably be on the committee because it's important that we proceed with the trust of the police department. And I think back to that conversation, and I can't remember, did anyone ever say that maybe having police on the committee might make it harder for people who had been victims of police violence to feel that they had the trust of their fellow committee members? Would it have been alienating for them to sit on that committee alongside police? And listening to this discussion right now, I keep feeling that we have so much concern for the trust of the police department and not enough concern for the trust of people who have been impacted by violent policing. That's what I think when I hear the rush to defend Chair Green's position on this committee. I actually agree with Nancy Heller that one person's remark should not be allowed to derail the important work that needs to be done. And that's why I think that Chair Green should resign from himself from the committee. Because as others have said, that work can go on without him. And yes, there was an apology, but we don't get to dictate the impact of our actions. And the impact of this action has been to undermine trust among people who already had, for reasons that that Anne already brought up before the committee, before the select board, who already had a lot of reasons not to trust the reform committee and not to trust Chair Green. So if we want to go forward with the trust of those individuals, there is a choice before us. And I would echo Amy Takanami's points that if the committee cannot continue under someone else's leadership, it should be disbanded. Yeah, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Bob Lepson. Bob, you've been promoted to a panelist, and you can unmute and share your video if you feel comfortable. Your 3 minutes will begin when you're ready.
Alrighty. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bob Lepson. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 9. I'm a member of the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, but speaking only for myself and not on behalf of the commission at all. I'm going to be very brief here. And the first thing that I would like to say is I want to offer full, underline, bold, italics support to people who have spoken before me. Select Board Member Fernandez, Jonathan Manday, Deborah Brown, Danelle O'Neill, Ryan Black, Ann Weaver, Amy Takanami, Emily Chen, Emma Nash. I have no objections whatsoever to what they have said, and I don't need to reiterate what they have said, but I want everybody who is listening to this to remember what they said, because what they said is incredibly important and incredibly accurate as far as I'm concerned as well. One additional statement, and then I would yield the rest of my time. I keep thinking about, let's just say this committee were being held in Staten Island. This conversation were in Staten Island, and there was a committee on police reform in Staten Island. Bernard, what would Eric Garner's family have to say? Think about that. What would Eric Garner's family have to say? And I think I'm going to just leave it like that because I have no answer to that question. I kind of know what the answer would be, but I think that it's something that all of us need to think about and internalize and understand that these things are not jokes. And I know you apologize and I know you recognized it immediately, but something is happening that allowed you to bring that forth. And I can't stop thinking about what would happen if this were in Staten Island. So thank you.
Can you let the dog in?
The next person signed up is Joanna Klein.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for letting me have the time to speak. So I have lived in Brookline for years. I talked a week or so ago. I'm a Brookline mom, 2012 and 2015. I'm a wife, I'm a doctor here, and I've lived here for years. I want to speak to the issue of trust. I'm a white lady, so my interactions with prejudice have been being female and being Jewish from when I was about age 4 until on. So I can't possibly imagine or walk in the shoes who is somebody as a person of color, but I think I can speak to trust. And yes, we all say things we shouldn't say sometimes, and we all make mistakes, but sometimes that mistake is something that's somewhat insurmountable in the positions that we're in. And I am struck by listening to everybody who spoke tonight, and in particular, persons of color, but also the youth, okay? Because they are our future. It is really not us, it is them. And I understand that the sum of a man and the sum of a woman and the sum of a person is not necessarily one comment that they have made. However, those comments have true and real implications. And Mr. Green, with all due respect, I think maybe you have lost the trust and the faith of the people that you are leading here on this committee. So I would urge you most strongly to think about that and to make the decision that is the right decision. And that decision would, at a very bare minimum, be to step down from that committee. I'm sure it's really hard to be a cop. I've never been a cop, a police officer. I'm sure it's an enormously stressful job. And it's also an even more stressful job to be a person of color in this community and in our country. And so when select person Hamilton and Venskoye, when you get on there and defend, I think that also breaches a huge trust that the community has in you, and also speaks to, what are your goals and what is your role and what is your job? I think about that every day, as we all do when we go in to do our jobs.
You have 30 seconds.
So I would urge you most strongly, Mr. Green, to do the right thing. And the right thing here is that you step down. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Marty Rosenthal. Marty, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute yourself and share your video if you feel comfortable.
Okay, thanks. I forgot to share my video. I don't want to hold. All right, here it is. There, sorry. Okay, thank you. So as chair of Brookline PACS, aside from being a former select board member and currently a town meeting member, first I have to add to my planned statement a super kudos to the board and to the police union for the camera agreement. Now my planned statement about Bernard. Our board voted at Sunday's meeting these 4 points. 1, to join the substantive criticism of Bernard's chokehold gesture on September 16th, but to accept his next day apology, saying things like inappropriate, a lapse, and I apologize. To decry the Number 3, to decry the presumably well-intentioned but severely overreacting call for him to resign, both as a select board member and as chair of the Reform Committee, where it's actually he who's pushed the chokehold ban. And number 4, to also see that this somewhat deserved but exaggerated outcry as one of several examples of the dangers of Warrant Article 16, recall of public officials for no specified reasons. In a democracy, fortunately, there's a regular way to remove leaders you criticize. They're called elections. Bernard got over 4,000 votes in 2018. The voters can pass judgment on him next May. A self-selected and vocal group demanding his immediate resignation for a basically non-impeachable but admitted offense feels instead like bullying. We decry the pandemic of progressives' incivility and ad hominem attacks in not just Brookline, but everywhere, seemingly an overreaction to and near mimicking of Trump derangement syndrome. And it really is a manifestation of the cancel culture. I refer you to July 23rd, New York Times op-ed, "Should we cancel Aristotle?" with a great 3-minute video, which is available on request if you wish. We find astonishing, it's called The Cancel Culture in 1283. We find astonishing the irony of anti-racist activists who not only urged the resignation of our first ever African-American select board member, but also by guilt by association, the entire police reform committee. Do they really want to set that work? I'm sorry, both sincere and clearly led by Bernard, back by more than 3 months. Are they concerned only with reimagining like the wonderful 2017 Minneapolis report, MPD 150, which then made no reforms?
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. PACS has always valued public service. Here, the seemingly popular demanded punishment is grossly disproportionate to Bernard's crime. We're well aware and not complacent that we'll now get further ad hominem attacks on PACS, like for other recent stances that various progressives have criticized. Speaking of Aristotle, for our annual newsletter, I've several times taken public solace from his criticism as something we can avoid by easily by saying nothing.
You've reached your 3 minutes.
And being nothing. Bernard's been doing plenty. Who here, even virtually, is infallible? Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is John Harris. John, when you're ready, your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give everybody a little break and talk about something completely different. My name is John Harris. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 8. I'm also co-chair of Climate Action Brookline and the person who reconvened Brookline's Sustainability Transportation Working Team. And although speaking privately, my remarks are inspired by my work on those groups. I'm going to speak about the opportunity you have next week during your vote for transportation board members to rapidly and cheaply reduce Brookline's greenhouse gas emissions. As the forest fires in California, Oregon, and Colorado remind us, the climate crisis is upon us and is having a major impact across the United States and the world, including in Brookline. Average temperatures in Brookline are going up as they are in the western states. We've now had several years with a week or more over 90 degrees, and 2 years ago we had a week or so of temperatures over 100 degrees. The only reason we in Brookline are not seeing and in Eastern Mass are not seeing an increase in forest fires here is that we have also seen an increase in annual rainfall until this year. We are now 30% below last year's rainfall. What is the trend on rainfall? No one knows for sure, but we have to prepare. I love a situation where you take two problems, butt them against each other. Each one is the solution for the other. The first, the transportation sector generates 42% of greenhouse gas emissions in Massachusetts. But at the same time, we should be aware that 1/2 of the car trips in Greater Boston, including in Brookline, are 3 miles or less. Next week, you will vote to fill 2 seats on the Transportation Board. Many of the candidates understand the impact of car and truck transportation on the climate crisis, but some do not. You have an excellent opportunity to vote responsibly. encouraging micromobility, that is, having people leave their car at home and get where they're going by car, e-scooter, wheelchair, etc., is the easiest, the cheapest, and the quickest way to reduce Brookline's greenhouse gas emissions. Most of the cost will be borne by the citizens who will buy or rent bikes, scooters, wheelchairs, etc., at a minimal cost, $300 to $500 for a serviceable bike or e-scooter, for example. The only cost to the town is to create the cost of creating safe, separated, and welcoming lanes in our roads for people to ride.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. It can be done without impeding the free movement of cars and trucks. It is not an either-or situation. In a few short years, we can significantly reduce a huge percentage of the 1/2 of the cars on Brookline's roads that are making trips of 3 miles or less. Just very quickly, the comment of last week about a now deceased cyclist who preferred to ride on secondary roads. We need to move beyond that. We need to make our roads so safe and stress-free that everyone can consider cycling, scooting, etc. for short trips. And another comment last week that micromode people reconcile themselves to choosing out-of-the-way routes, even if they are longer? No. Town meeting spoke forcefully when it approved Warrant Article 31. Brookline's transportation priority is the movement of people and goods. It takes precedent over the movement of cars and trucks.
3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Thank you. Micromodes, bikes, scooters, wheelchairs, etc., deserve equal space on our roads. Thank you very much, and I apologize for going over.
The next person signed up for public comment is Mike Offner.
Thank you, Mike Offner, town meeting member, precinct 12. First, I just want to note that I've had some very serious conversations with members of our police department, specifically Chief Andy Lepson, Deputy Superintendent Thomas Ward, also known as Tiger, Sergeant Casey Hatchett, and a young officer I will not name with whom I did a civilian ride along before COVID. Any of these folks can tell you how seriously I take our police department, how much I respect our police department. In terms of Bernard Green's and June Binney's actions, I've read a number of people invoking the Jewish days of awe, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, to offer their forgiveness to Chair Green. But these people fundamentally misunderstand how forgiveness around the high holidays works. The teaching is that if you transgress against God by eating non-kosher food or working on Shabbat, you can go pray in temple and be forgiven. But if you do something wrong against another person, the teaching is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, does not atone for anyone who's wronged another person until those two people have made peace with each other. So given that Bernard's and June's actions primarily hurt people of color and young men of color, white people, Jewish or not, select board members or not, town meeting members or not, advisory committees or not, simply have no business and no standing to forgive Bernard or June because they were not the ones hurt. So for white select board members to even open their mouths and defend Bernard or June on these topics, it is ridiculous and offensive, and to be clear, completely inconsistent with basic principles of forgiveness as taught in the Jewish teachings about what forgiveness means. And I certainly hope no one else will invoke Yom Kippur as any kind of basis for them to offer forgiveness to Bernard and June when they were not the ones primarily hurt. Thank you.
The next and final person signed up for public comment is Ugo Uolano. You can begin when you're ready, and I'll start your 3 minutes.
We're reading something.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Ugo Uolano, resident of Brookline Village, an architect by profession. I'd like to echo the statements of everyone tonight who has said that, echo the statement of a resignation. Over the last few months and years, with all the atrocities we've seen by police towards Black men, I've thought a lot about how we as a nation and a community can improve the situation, how we can address systemic racism, how we can get people to see how prejudices and stereotypes of the past affect the current situation. Never have I thought about mimicking or mocking a chokehold or someone be choked out by the police. So that action was beyond inappropriate, and it erodes the trust of the community when someone like that is still in their position of power. Because if the community doesn't have faith in that body, then whatever work or whatever policies that they come up with isn't going to be taken seriously. And to me, that's not bullying to call on his resignation. That's essentially how democracy works, when people raise their voices to say that they're displeased with something and that they want change to occur. And another thing I'd like to say is that someone talked about the morale of the police, and that's something I've heard mentioned on the national level as well. As a Black man, with that's had to deal with the police having their eye on me, or kind of seeming like they would come after me. Their morale is something that I've never really been concerned about. It seems like they want to be able to just trample on people's rights, and with zero consequences. And when we try to call them out on that, they say that their morale is being hurt, or they have hurt feelings or whatever. When they're supposed to be our public servants, they're supposed to be serving and protecting us, the people. So again, I would just like to say that I also like to lend my voice of support to the resignation. And I appreciate the comments that everyone has made tonight, especially Mike Hoffner. I hope I got that right, who spoke before me.
You have 30 seconds.
Oh, that was it. Thank you.
All right. The final person signed up for public comment is Eric Hyatt. Eric, when you're ready, your 3 minutes will begin.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay, Devin?
Yes.
Okay, wait, I have my TV on. Let me just shut it off. I'm so sorry. I've been watching this on Brookline Interactive Group TV. It's a lot more fun that way, and I like to see that the reach of the Brookline Interactive Group across all the town. Hi, my name is Eric Hyatt. I'm a Brookline resident. I just want to echo and support the comments of the amazing people of color who spoke tonight. I don't really need to say much more. There's no part of me that thinks that Bernard believes that chokeholds are good. There's no part of me that believes that. But we're talking about part of a pattern and practice here of just fawning support on the Brookline Police Department without allowing in critical thinking and reason and the voices of the community. And it's unacceptable. This has to change. The leadership of the committee has to change. It has to change. And the committee shouldn't exist in the first place. Raul's committee is the real committee. Let's get real here. There's a committee to commission task force to reimagine policing. That's what we need to do. Reimagine policing. This is just, I'm not going to use profanity, but I'm feeling like it's pretty much bull crap. Okay. The Bernard's entire committee. And I hate to be sitting here having this conversation. It's not, there's no joy in this. I just want to lend my support to the voices of color in this community, my friends who don't live in Brookline, who are terrified to come to my place and hang out, my wonderful, safe place. They find it terrifying to drive into our town because our police might pull them over. This got to stop, and we've got to get real about this entire topic. Please support Raul, listen to him, he's doing the right thing. And Bernard, please step down from that committee, just disband the thing and listen to Raul already. Just enough. You can't get past this. I don't think you can get past it. You may get reelected, but you can't get past this with the town. So please, please, please just shut it down. Thank you.
That is the conclusion of the public comment period tonight, which had 18 speakers.
Okay, let's move on to a question of approving the meeting minutes for the following dates. September 8, 2020, September 15, 2020. Any corrections? on the select board? Okay, I move approval of the minutes for September 8, 2020 and September 15, 2020. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Heller?
Did you get that, Bernard? I said aye.
Aye, right. Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanscoya?
Aye.
Okay. And chair votes aye. Question of approving the request to enter into a contract with the Massachusetts Historical Commission in order to receive the allocation of fiscal year 20 survey and planning grant funds in the amount of $25,000 for the Linden and Vernon Harris Street neighborhoods. This is a survey update. Mr. Kleckner, do you want to speak on that?
Not really. We had, I think this is the procedure of trying to consolidate these miscellaneous items into a single vote. And so our attempt has been to try to include in your packet as much information as possible. So if that's going to change, I'd need a department head or official to be here to respond to questions.
No, I didn't think that these were sufficiently similar to consolidate, and there are only 3. So any questions from the board? Okay, I move approval. Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanscoya?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Question of awarding and executing contracts number PW 21-01, repair of concrete sidewalks with Richard D'Ambrosio, from Weymouth, Massachusetts, in the amount of $351,342.87. Any questions about that? Okay, I move approval. Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanscoya?
Aye.
Okay, chair votes aye. Question of approving GMP change order number 3/PCCO number 10 for the Brookline High School project with Skanska in the amount of $627,224. Any questions regarding that? Okay, I move approval. Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Fernandez?
Aye.
Zaranskoya?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Next, resolution of the select board adopting a resolution honoring Patrick Daubert for his service to the Brookline Housing Authority. And let me get this up on my computer and I'll read it. Okay, sorry, I'm having trouble finding it. There are a lot of attachments to those previous 3 items.
Page 28.
Page 28. Okay. Page 28 is an AIA document, at least in my packet. Let me, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's 30.
Pardon me?
30.
30?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I take it back. It's not 30. I apologize.
Are you?
31. 31.
31. Okay. Yeah, I apologize. I'm looking at the packet on my computer, my big computer, while I'm doing this meeting on the laptop. So juggling those 2 things is difficult. Okay, resolution of the select board recognizing the meritorious service of Patrick Daubert to the town of Brookline and the Brookline Housing Authority. Whereas on Friday, September 25th, 2020, Patrick Daubert will be honored at a celebration by the Brookline Housing Authority, honoring his 9 years as executive director, and that will be a virtual celebration. And whereas during Patrick Daubert's tenure as executive director, he has overseen the development for the first low-income new construction family housing development in nearly 40 years, providing much-needed homes to 32 families. And whereas Patrick Daubert has overseen the implementation of the major redevelopment of the BHA's 499 units of federal public housing through the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, RADS, ensuring that all residents will continue to benefit from affordable rents and also be able to enjoy major physical rehabilitation of their apartments and common areas. And whereas during Patrick Daubert's tenure, he has played a central role in the creation and expansion of programs serving BHA residents, including the Steps to Success Student Achievement Partnership, employment assistance, financial and technical literacy, free tax preparation, English literacy, food assistance, coordinated mental health services, and independent living and socialization services for seniors. Whereas Patrick Daubert has developed and fostered community partnerships with organizations, including but not limited to the Brookline Community Foundation, the Brookline Center, Steps to Success, the Food Pantry, Springwell, that provide a myriad of services that benefit the individuals and households that reside in Brookline housing. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Select Board of the Town of Brookline, on behalf of the residents of the town and with gratitude for Patrick Daubert's numerous contributions to the town of Brookline and those served by the Brookline Housing Authority, hereby expresses this board's and the town's sincere thanks and appreciation to Patrick Daubert for his many years of meritorious service, and signed by members of the Select Board. Any discussion by the board?
I just wanted to say that in one respect, this doesn't go far enough. This was an extraordinary tenure of major achievements. And one of those achievements was accomplished just within the past year, as Patrick Daubert was in his final months in charge of the authority. And that's the various votes that had to be taken and negotiations that had to be conducted in order to get support for funds to support the Colonel Floyd renovations. And I won't go into all the details, but some $6 million, I believe is the correct number, from the Well Tower project to go to the Colonel Floyd renovations and make a considerable difference in the quality of life for the Colonel Floyd residents. So my personal congratulations to Patrick Daubert. There are great things ahead for the BHA under the leadership of its new director, Michael Alper. But the work that Patrick Daubert did paved the way for the work that is going to continue into the future.
I'll just say briefly, I'm going to be speaking at that event this Friday, honoring Patrick, and talk about sort of public servant, the time he's given to the community of Brookline, but largely, even bigger than that, the effort that he's put toward supporting those who need it most. And so I'll have much more to say on Friday, but just this is well deserved, and look forward to celebrating Patrick in the days to come.
Okay, any other comments?
I would just add my accolades to Patrick Daubert. When I first became a member of the Select Board, I asked for a tour of the various facilities of the BHA, and I was impressed then, not only with the facilities, but with his relationship with both the tenants and the people who work there. It was clearly very warm, very cordial, and you could see that he'd really made an impact. And I think I can see that in the work that he's done before that and since that time. And I think that he will be missed, and he has big shoes to fill. And I wish Michael Alper well. Okay.
I move approval of the resolution on behalf of Patrick Dobert. All in favor, Ms. Heller,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
Hernandez,
Aye.
Ms. Skoyak?
Aye.
You're-
Aye. Here
You're frozen. Okay.
Aye,
And chair votes aye. Okay, and we'll put this together in a nice frame and be presented to him virtually or somehow at the Friday event. I think I'm going to be making the presentation of the resolution. Next, boards and commissions interviews. The following candidates for appointment, reappointment to boards and commissions will appear for interview. Starting off with Economic Development Advisory Council, EDAB Advisory Board. First person is to be interviewed is Jeff Wachter. Apologize for messing up your name.
Great. Hi, I wrote a brief intro and then we can get to questions. So hi, my name is Jeff Wachter and I live at 51 John Street in Coolidge Corner, and I'm interested in joining the Economic Development Advisory Board because at the core of many of the challenges we face as a town is the over-reliance on residential property taxes. And as I spend time in Coolidge Corner or Washington Square or drive down Boylston Street, I can't help but think about the opportunity for increased development and both the stronger fiscal footing it would put us on and the stronger community it could help us build. My background offers useful perspectives to these aims. I studied the history of cities in graduate school, focusing on city-county relationships and particularly the economic and political impacts of that city-county consolidation, both successful and failed attempts. I worked for the city of Baltimore, studying how to retain and attract new Americans, issuing a report that focused heavily on small business and workforce development, as well as housing. In my current professional life, I work in finance and operations at a commercial real estate company. Through this role, I hear regular updates on the current state of commercial and business development in communities across the region, which could provide valuable information as EDAB is considering potential corridor studies, what types of businesses to seek to attract, how we can leverage Brookline's many assets to attract the kind of businesses that will both contribute financially and increase the vibrancy of our commercial districts. I also previously owned and ran a small business employing about a half dozen people, so I understand some of the challenges that our local businesses face on a daily basis and believe that it's crucial that in addition to attracting larger commercial tenants, we develop creative ways to foster small business growth and support our current businesses that add so much richness to our neighborhoods. And finally, here in Brookline, I've served as a town meeting member and have attended most of the EDAB meetings over the past year, as well as multiple town meetings, and helped on the organizing committee of the Building a Better Brookline housing forums, and currently serve as a board member of Brookline for Everyone. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Okay, I guess I'll start off. With respect to Brookline for Everyone and building another Brookline, how do the positions that those groups have taken, how would they inform the work that you do on EDAB?
Sure.
I'm eating my dinner in between breaks here.
Understandable. I'm looking forward to mine soon. So I think EDAB is really vital to achieving the goals expressed both through Brookline for Everyone as well as through the Building Better Brookline housing forums. There's, as Bob Sperber recognized when he first established EDAB back in, I believe it was the early 80s, we can't simply rely on residential taxes to provide the services that we need. And if we want to continue to grow as our community and as our region grows, we need to support the services that our new residents and current residents currently demand by adding more commercial tax-based commercial development. I think a lot of the zoning changes that are necessary in order to attract the commercial development that I think we need will serve the needs of both. And I also think it's worth noting one of the key tenets that we put in when Brookline for Everyone got started is that economic development has to be a key tenet of any of the work that we do. So I think that housing and economic development have to go hand in hand. Otherwise, we'll just collapse under the broad needs that we all have.
Great. Any questions? Any other questions from the select board?
I had a question if I may. Oh, I'm sorry. Heather raised her hand.
Heather, yeah.
I'm going to defer to Heather.
I appreciate that. So when is density too dense? And basically the crux of my question is, how do we know that we have enough open space for those of us that, you know, don't mind density, but at some, where's the tipping point?
Sure. I think to start, it's important to think about what kind of open space we actually want. I think a lot of times there's open space that's part of new development that ends up being a couple of trees in a corner that no one will ever actually use. I think the example of from Olde Durgan is a great one. That as part of the package that was negotiated, they're expanding what are currently 2 parking lots, which I suppose you could argue are open space, to be an actual park for people to actually exist. Currently in that location, there's about 3 benches and a little park, which are very often used. And it'll be great to actually have space in the neighborhood to allow for the people in that new building, as well as the neighbors around there, to congregate. So I think it's crucially important that as part of any long-term plan, we're focusing on creating the places that people want to spend time. We need to create a good community, and a community that people want to be part of, as part of all these plans. And I think that also goes hand in hand with economic development. If you create a place that has nice places to sit nearby, then that new ice cream shop or the bakery is going to have even more business, because people will want to be outside nearby, and we'll then be providing more customers for those.
Thank you.
Mr. Van Scoyoc.
Hey, Jeff. I first want to say thank you to you and Amanda, and to Brookline for Everyone for the role that you have played in raising housing issues to the forefront in Brookline, affordable housing issues to the forefront in Brookline, and also in engaging people and bringing about greater levels of civic involvement by people. It's been a learning experience for a lot of us, and I think the issues are going to continue to be discussed going forward that you've raised, and that's all good. I'm also struck by the image behind you, which I feel like, do you have to turn around to be sure of what I'm referring to? But that's, of course, it's a green screen image. It's a building, it looks like it's at the corner of, is that Gibbs Street?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So that building is so characteristic of the kind of streetscape that is near and dear to so many people in Brookline, because of its design features, because of its scale, and because of just the good feeling it gives to people, you know, not just living in it, but walking past it. And it makes me wonder, because you and I have not had a chance to have too many conversations, and this is one of those conversations we haven't had a chance to have. If you could give us some sense of your view of the value of adaptive reuse and the value of preserving some properties and not allowing development to overtake the very types of buildings that we identify with the Brookline experience. So I'll leave it at that and just let you comment.
Sure. So yeah, as you noticed, this is over on Gibbs Street, and I think that this is, I think this sort of density is just right for so many of our residential streets. I think that this type of building is perfect on Gibbs and Coolidge, and in those areas, it's near places where people can walk to get most of their needs met, can utilize public transit. And I think that this sort of a building isn't necessarily appropriate in all places in town. I think that there are stretches up Route 9 near the Newton line. This building would feel a little out of place. While there's still a lot of opportunity to continue to develop that area. I think there are putting it right at the corner of at Coolidge Corner might not be as appropriate either. I think it's there's opportunity to increase some density there. But as you go a block or two off some of the major corridors. I think this is exactly the type of housing that we need to re-legalize. I think in most places, you couldn't build this building today. And I think that's a shame. And I think there's a lot of places where this sort of building could add more units and more opportunities for new neighbors and more people to live in the walkable neighborhoods that many in Brookline love, without feeling super overwhelming. I think that in the same location, if you were to put up an 8 to 10 story building, it would feel very out of place, and I think inappropriate. So I think it's most buildings that we have here in town have the place that suits them best, and I think that there's no permanent or overarching place for everything. Like there's no I think it would be a mistake to create a huge one-size-fits-all for all of Brookline that would allow for the type of density that would be perfect for Beacon or for Boylston, because as you mentioned, it wouldn't feel right in many places.
Okay, great.
Can I ask one question, Bernard? So I'm just wondering whether you think that in the idea of growing of economic growth and increasing housing, we should also strive to increase the population in Brookline. And what would that, is that what you believe we should do?
Yeah, I think if we are adding significant housing, that would increase the population as well. Yes.
And what would that do to services in Brookline, and how would we be able to afford, for instance, influx of many students to our schools when we can't even get a nice school built?
Sure, that's a great question, and I think one of the subcommittees at EDAB right now is examining that question. I was able to attend between work meetings. I was able to attend the meeting this morning where I think it was the fiscal impact model study subcommittee, and it made the case that there are some places that blind density would not necessarily be good, but there are other locations that would be more beneficial to do that. And I think there's a lot of different types of housing. I think we can add a lot of housing units that would serve a lot of needs that wouldn't necessarily overburden our schools. I think it's also important to note a study from a few years ago that MAPC produced, where they found very little correlation between housing production and student population. I think we can look just at Brookline and note how large the school population got, an increase of over in the early 2010s without a significant increase in housing. So I think there's a lot of nuance to how you can create more housing while also maintaining fiscal stability, and I think that's one of the most important things that EDAB is working on. I think that's really a lot of the point. I think we need to be very, very strategic about where we put increased housing, what type of housing this is, and to approve it and allow it in conjunction with increased commercial development.
Okay, thank you. We have 8 interviews tonight, so let's try to be a little more concise in our questioning, and hopefully, the interviewees will also. I see that Derek Choi wants to fly in here.
Hello.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? All right, I'll be brief. I myself am a little tight on time this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to interview for my reselection on EDAB. I've been a part of EDAB since 2013. I've been a resident of Brookline since 2009, and this is being on EDAB has been an integral part of my education as a citizen in Brookline. In terms of the professional background, I am a transportation architect with a focus on aviation infrastructure as well as transportation-oriented development. My concern as I seek to continue serving on EDAB is what's next for us. You know, with 29% of our town revenues not specific to real estate taxes, we need to really think differently as we move ahead in a post-COVID world. And I'm particularly concerned about the future of how we think of permitting and zoning ideas, you know, moving forward. I think that the biggest question is, can we develop a proactive approach? You know, going back to Jeff's comments about appropriateness of density, we can certainly be denser, but we can also be smarter. And looking at some of the upcoming opportunities and conversations with developers, I think we really have a watershed moment to kind of rethink our process. And I think if you think about River Road and Newbury College, I think we've had collectively a great opportunity to think about how we work proactively and efficiently in the near future. So with that, I'd like to open the floor to your questions.
Okay, great. Any questions from the board? You basically know Derek Choi, at least some of us do. At any rate, Mr. Fernandez.
Sir.
Good to be with you. I have a quick question. It's about parking as it relates to economic development. And you know, it seems that Brookline is schizophrenic when it comes to parking. We require it sometimes in places where it's not needed, and then we limit it in places where it is needed. I'm wondering if you can just reflect upon you know, what you think is needed, particularly in our commercial areas around parking. How do we handle this? We've seen in particular the proliferation of these parklets, which I think are a great development, but every time a parklet goes, that's a few parking spots that are gone as well. What do we need to do? I mean, do we need to put up a multi-deck parking lot? What's the right solution for us as you see it?
All right, and, this is a great question, right? It's a vexing question for all of us transportation planners. I mean, clearly, as you look at where we are as a community, we're getting a lot smarter with our parking requirements, right? We're really, as we look at these commercial districts, I think this is where we can really leverage spot zoning to be a lot more efficient with the utilization of our spaces. As we think of a post-COVID future, I think we can really have some hard questions on the future of disruptive micro transit. I think we really need to think about what is the future of a carless node for some of our critical commercial centers. So I think we do have these opportunities to really take a hard look at parking, and as we look at micro units and some of the other ways to create better transit-oriented development, I think we need to really be smart and flexible in our zoning. And again, I think that is part and parcel of the big changes that we need to rethink. And I think we've had conversations ad nauseum about how we can rethink our transit requirements. But parking, I think, is really symptomatic of a bigger question, right? As to how do we move in a denser and larger community as we talk about density. So there are appropriate locations for parking, no question. And there's also appropriate locations to really think about micro transit and disruptive mobility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Was there any other questions?
I'll just make a comment.
Okay.
And I have a question.
Sure.
Derek, thank you for your great work on the architectural subcommittee of the Newbury Zoning Committee and also the committee itself. You really made a difference. Brought down the size of the project, and it's looking great. It's going through the process now, and we're also going to be having an election on the vote of the Newbury West Side. So, but I want to ask you the same question that I asked Jeff, and that is that do you favor the significant development in the housing area? Do you think Brookline's population should grow, and what impact will that have on town services?
Sure.
Particularly schools.
Right. I think the big question really is, can we balance the services with the growing demand. And again, going back to spot zoning and being very specific about how we encourage these development sectors, I am absolutely comfortable with the idea of growth. I am not comfortable with how we're going to find the appropriate balance of services and the appropriate locations for growth that may negatively impact our school population. So I do have some reservations, but looking ahead, I think we have to be very, very selective and very specific. As you look at other tools, again, like micro units, there are many ways to increase densities. There's nothing wrong with density, but it may also not have to negatively impact or put additional stress on our educational system. So, with that, I think we just need to be a little bit more open-minded with different ways to think about these zoning opportunities. So those are my thoughts. But on that note, I do have to say that as we look ahead for future virtual interviews, I would strongly encourage that we find a way to notify interviewees at least a day in advance of their appointments, so people can plan for it. For some of us who are working in all time zones in this new Zoom reality, I've got an international call at 8 o'clock, and it's just a real challenge for us to balance this. And I know you all are doing yeoman's work, just keeping up with the 3-hour sessions. But to the extent that you can, let us know. We're all volunteers. We all like to make it work to the extent that we can. So
we appreciate that comment and apologize for any late notice, but this is a difficult time to do anything, but point well taken.
Excellent.
Okay, and I made a mistake. We only have 5 interviewees, but still we need to be careful with the amount of time on each interview. Thank you, Derek.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Okay. Next is Nancy Moore. Well, I didn't say this to the other interviewees, but I'll say it to you. Please introduce yourself and tell us why you want to be a member of the Transportation, actually be reappointed to the Transportation Board. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I am a member. Thank you. My name is Nancy Moore. I live at 89 Carlton Street in Precinct 1. I'm a lawyer and I'm a tenured professor at the Boston University Law School. I was initially appointed to the Transportation Board in approximately April of 2018. I've regularly attended meetings of the board. I've served as a Transportation Board liaison to 2 of the subcommittees, the Public Transportation Subcommittee and the Brookline. I currently serve as the liaison to the Brookline Commission on Disability, where I serve with Select Member Hamilton. I would very much like to continue my work with the board. I believe that I've been a constructive participant in the board's deliberations and discussions. I share Chair Dempsey's goal of working efficiently, airing our different viewpoints, and attempting to achieve consensus wherever possible as we balance the interests of the various stakeholders, including vehicle drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, and most recently, micromobility users, something that I wouldn't have thought to discuss at my initial interview in 2018. And of course, always with special concern for the safety of those who are most vulnerable, including persons with disabilities. My work with the Brookline Commission on Disability has educated me significantly about special concerns that those individuals face that sometimes get overlooked in the debates. As a lawyer, I think I bring a particular expertise, both in terms of thinking about some of the legal or potential legal issues that are often raised, examining documents, whether they're legal documents or other, with attention to detail. And most particularly, of particular interest to me is an emphasis on process. I am very much concerned with our ongoing obligation to give adequate notice to all of the stakeholders. And this is not always an easy thing to do, to identify who the stakeholders are and who it is who gets individual notice as opposed to just being expected to see what's on the town calendar. So my concern is that those stakeholders receive adequate notice and that they have an opportunity to be heard. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I'd be happy to just ask a brief question if that's okay.
Sure.
And Nancy, hello, and thank you for the service that you've been giving to the Transportation Board.
Thank you.
I have a particular interest myself in bicycling, and I know it's always a difficult thing to do, to sort of figure out how the future can accommodate more bicycling. But I'm one of those people who firmly believes it can accommodate and must accommodate more bicycling. I won't go into all the reasons, but I think the climate reason is probably the one at the top of my list. So I just wonder if you can give me your vision of the future of bicycling in Brookline.
It's going to increase. There's no question that it will and that it should. I can just, use as one example, Boston University, which until recently had significantly been subsidizing employees, faculty and staff who drove. And those who, were bicycling or using public transportation didn't get the kind of subsidy that the car drivers did in terms of affordable parking. The university provides parking at a relatively low cost. And several years ago, in order to incentivize more of the employees to use public transportation or ride a bicycle, they changed the incentive structure. So now if you ride a bicycle, you're entitled to a financial reimbursement that's designed to cover certain costs, or you can, get some reimbursement towards public transportation. So I know when I first was appointed to the board, I was working with Heather and trying to figure out, what to do about teacher parking. And I know Nancy Heller was very active in that as well. And clearly, part of the solution is trying to offer incentives to get people to reduce, driving cars and incentivize bicyclists. So there's no question everybody recognizes it will happen, it should happen, and we just have to be concerned about the way in which we, sort of have to deal with particular issues on particular streets. Where is it possible to create bike lanes? Can you, to what extent can the bike lanes be protected? Those are very fact-intensive decisions, and those are the kinds of decisions that the board has to make.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Heather.
Sorry, this just segues so nicely. So there was a proposal, I think about 2 years ago, to do a pilot, I think in the St. Mary's area, just for 2 hours in the morning to do, to get rid of the on-street parking on Beacon, to pilot a dedicated bike lane. Just remind me, where does that proposal stand right now? What are your thoughts on that proposal?
I wondered myself, because I don't know what happened. It just kind of disappeared. I think we were not able to, we were considered at one meeting, the various merchants had not received proper notice, so we had to delay it to another meeting. By then it was fall, and you couldn't really, like if you don't get started, it has to be done when the weather is good. You can't do a pilot in, in late fall or winter. And then I've never heard it. I honestly don't know what happened. I don't know why it never came back. So we never really had the opportunity to understand how it would work. So, in other words, how is it actually, as a practical matter, how are you going to, make those lanes available during that 2-hour period? What were you going to do with the handicap spots? What were you going to do with the patients who needed to be dropped off at the medical buildings? These are issues that I think, again, I think a pilot project is a good idea, but somebody needs to bring it back and to provide the board with the specific information it needs to understand what's the impact going to be on the merchants and, you know, how is this going to be enforced?
Okay.
I will find out what happened. I'll ask Todd. I actually don't know why it hasn't been brought back.
I just want to ask one quick question,
Sure.
I hope. So I know that you're a member of the BU faculty, and I also know that BU has shuttles for students to various places. As they drive down my street and I see them, there's an MIT BU shuttle. And I'm wondering whether they've ever considered that for their employees. That shuttles, I mean, I think the time of shuttles, which are going to be electric vehicles, is coming at some point. But it seems to me that if you had shuttles that could bring employees to and from work, that would reduce the car traffic, reduce the carbon emissions, because you have one thing instead of however many, 10 or whatever. I'm wondering whether that has been given, if you've heard any talk about that at BU.
I have not. I mean, one of the problems with BU is that the faculty and other staff come from the great, you know, like
disparate
greater Boston,
yeah.
You know, so the question is, well, shuttles where? You know, you can't provide shuttles for all of these different neighborhoods. If there are neighborhoods, I think that the first step is to say those who can take public transportation or can bicycle, let's provide incentives and see to what extent that significantly reduces the problem. If that's not enough, then I think BU is very open to suggestions. I think they're concerned with the density and the traffic and the safety issues. When, you know, several years ago, there were very significant, there were very, there were fatalities. There were accidents involving trucks and bicyclists or trucks and pedestrians. And so, you know, there's a concern. I don't know. It's very hard to know because of COVID. It's extremely hard to know at this time what the, you know, the extent to which commuting is posing particular problems.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We'll be voting on reappointments and any new members at a future meeting.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, next we have Lena OLeary for the Transportation Board. And aerospace engineer. Sounds exciting.
Oh, thank you.
But then I was an economics major. What do I know about science?
All right. So hello, my name is Len OLeary. I'm the father of 2 children who attend the Driscoll School. I've lived in Brookline for 14 years. I use many different forms of transportation in Brookline. I volunteer as a driver for the Brookline Food Pantry. I recently joined a team that drives to the Greater Boston Food Bank and loads roughly 10,000 pounds of food into the vehicles and then unloads the food at the Egmont Street location of the Brookline Food Pantry. As a volunteer for Mutual Aid Brookline, I deliver groceries to people who are at high risk to COVID. Most of my deliveries are done via bike, but I use my minivan for large orders. I'm a member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and to piggyback on Nancy's comments about keeping people informed, we recently had record attendance at a Bicycle Advisory Committee meeting, in part because I sent the proposed designs to town meeting members whose precinct covers Longwood Avenue, a street under consideration for redesign. I walk my kids to school. As an aerospace engineer for over 15 years, I make decisions based on the available information. When it comes to voting on the Transportation Board, I will gather as much information as possible and weigh the pros and cons of the alternatives.
Great. Any questions from select board members? Well, okay, sounds like you're a big biker. How do you think about the sort of tension between bikers and other non-motorized traffic and cars, which many people are forced to use to get to and from work, either because they work far away or like teachers, they tote around a lot of stuff that would make your biking pretty unstable. But that's an open-ended question regarding how do we think about this?
Okay, sure. So I'd like to talk about one example where a bike lane in Brookline has made a difference. Thanks to the tireless efforts of Todd Corain, a separated bike lane was added to the outbound section of Beacon Street from Marion to Westbourne Terrace. Prior to the bike lane installation on this stretch, there was roughly 1 motor vehicle crash with a pedestrian and 1 motor vehicle crash with a cyclist per year. After the protected bike lane was installed in the fall of 2016, there have been 0 motor vehicle crashes with pedestrians or cyclists along this stretch. In response to COVID-19, the town has shown that it values the survival of restaurants more than parking spots with close proximity. We can now dine in the streets of Beacon, Harvard, and Washington. And I think that how we choose to allocate our public space is a reflection of what we value.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Lynn, are you interested in promoting bicycle routes on less traveled streets, and how would you make that happen?
Yeah, so I think Google Maps does a good job at providing directions for cyclists. Its directions frequently include roads which have less motor vehicle traffic, but often there's not a safe route to go from point A to point B. On Brookline Day 2 years ago, I wanted to bike with my son from Lars Anderson Park to Sewell Park. We reviewed the maps and finding no routes with quiet streets, ended up riding through Horace James Circle. We did not feel safe, and the crash data is consistent with how we felt. There is a car crash about once per week at this intersection. The town should focus on completing the recommendations in the Bicycle Committee's Green Routes Bicycle Network Plan. If there are good routes to take, the cyclists will find them.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Woolley. And like I've told other people, we will be voting on new appointees as well as reappointees to this committee and others at a later board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is this Mr. Flint, Anthony Flint? Yes.
Yes. Hi, thank you.
Okay,
so I'm Anthony Flint.
Yeah.
I'm a resident of 254 Walnut Street, Precinct 5. Since 2010, I've been on the board of the High Street Hill Association and serve as the organization's vice president. I also participated in the Boylston Street Corridor Advisory Committee process recently. I'm a senior fellow at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, which is a global think tank based in Cambridge. I've been a journalist and author and write about architecture, urban design, and urban planning. A recent Boston Globe essay I was going to try to post in the Q&A function, but I'm not sure that's possible. But anyway, it looked at pedestrian infrastructure and the importance of connections for sustainable mobility and the multimodal use of our streets for bikes, scooters, and pedestrians. Earlier in my career, I served in the Office for Commonwealth Development in Massachusetts state government. And the key idea there was banding together the agencies responsible for housing, transportation, the environment, energy, and also economic development. And I feel like that's part of the approach that I would take on the Transportation Board, the way that our sustainable future is interrelated that it's never just transportation. It's transportation and land use, transportation and housing, transportation and zoning. I'm a big supporter of transit-oriented development and of complete streets, and understand how things like parking minimums can be a barrier to affordability in housing. Another example of that interconnection. But it's also about how some of the fine print of the rules of the game can be so critical, and with just a few tweaks, we can really make change. So I would relish the opportunity to continue to shape the public realm in Brookline according to sustainable principles, with the aspiration of being both beautiful and functional, and would be happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, any questions from the select board?
I'll go.
Okay, go.
I don't know if you've seen some of the piloted shared streets initiatives throughout Brookline. I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on whether you think the select board did the right thing. It was very controversial at the time and still remains fairly controversial in some parts of the community. So have you seen them? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I've followed it and biked it and driven by it, and I'm generally impressed. I think that Boston and Cambridge have shown the way a little bit, and really all around the country, from Oakland to New York. This idea of not thinking of the public realm as this fixed thing, but rather something that can be adjusted. And sure, moving the parking spaces or a little bit of a different configuration can be hard for people to accept. But I think that as other communities really get into this, and I cite Boston and Cambridge, that it'll become more acceptable and a little bit less frightening, perhaps.
John, did you have a question?
Sorry, I did in fact, and as a retired journalist, it'd be remiss if I didn't ask Anthony if he sees some particular strength that a journalist can bring to this committee work. Guess what? Guess how I feel on that question.
Self-serving.
Yeah, well, I think, journalism is good training and a lifelong skill for all kinds of things. You come into just about everything with an open mind, and you do a lot of research and collect information and the evidence, and that has been strengthened by my time in academia and at the Lincoln Institute. It's a process of, not having any sort of like flash judgments, but really taking into account all kinds of evidence, and then working together with others, to reach a conclusion.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Flint. As I said, we'll be voting on new applicants as well as the reappointments to the Transportation Board at a future meeting. And we'll make sure you know about it. Thank you. Okay, I think that's the last interview. Next, fun warrant articles. Okay, starting with Article 16, warrant Article 16, recall of elected officials. Do we have someone to talk about that?
Yeah, Bernard, just give me 1 minute. I need to promote them.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Mariah Nobrega, petitioner for warrant Article 16, which is recall of townwide officials. Would you like me to actually go through my presentation, or do you want to, do you want a
Well, I
want a
think most board
presentation?
members have reviewed this already, unless, you know, someone tells me they haven't. And maybe you should just motivate the reason why you want to, or why you're introducing this warrant article.
Sure. So
it's intended to address and how it addresses that.
Okay.
To add to, Mariah, you're probably going to do this, but I know you just sent us an updated version. If you could highlight the changes between
Yep.
that and the version we have.
Okay, I haven't seen
Yeah,
that.
you know, I realized just a couple minutes ago that I had sent it to Sandy and it got approved, but I forgot to send it to Select Board. So, so why don't I go over what you're talking about, Bernard, and then I'll highlight the changes quickly, and you can ask me questions. So basically, it's a good governance mechanism. It would allow recall of town officials, townwide elected officials. So Select Board, school committee, moderator, housing trustees, constable, library trustees, so that's the general idea. Is the why is good governance, and the how is a high bar. And I want to sort of go through it. I actually have a flow chart that might be helpful, even though I said, do you want to see my presentation? But it might actually be helpful to visualize how much needs to happen before this happens. So Devin, do I have the right to share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can pull this up. Can you see the slides?
Yep.
Okay. So let me minimize all of you so I don't see you. So basically there's two processes, and one is the process to actually initiate the recall. So the first step is that there have to be 500 signatures certified. And then, so that's the first 3 steps here. Then the town clerk's office gives the petitioner official recall blank forms. And then they have 30 days to get those signed by 10% of registered voters. So that's a little bit less than 4,000 people. So the first bar is 500, then the second bar is 4,000 people. And then those need to be certified. And then once that certified petition is submitted, the select board notifies the person in writing, and then an election can be held 90 days later. And so the total time here we're talking about is 5 to 7 months. And then the frequency, because it's such a long, slow process, and because there's pauses, you can't be recalled within the first 3 months of your tenure, you can't be recalled within the last 3 months of your tenure, and you can't be recalled more than 6 months in between this process. Really, if you were going at the fastest pace, it could happen about once a year, but that would require a huge amount of effort, like wild amounts of effort. And then the one thing I want to show here is this came up actually on the town meeting listserv, and also it came up in the town meeting listserv. And so this change is the principal change that you see at the bottom of the screen, which is for the last step of the process. And this is actually something that John Van Scoyoc, participating as a member of the public at the advisory committee subcommittee, brought up, that there should be some sort of a threshold for participation in the election. And so basically whereas before it was a simple majority of any number of people in the special election, the recall would count. But now, to be recalled, you actually have to have 20% of the registered voters of the town vote. And not just 20%, but actually you have to have a super majority. You have to have 2/3 majority of the votes to be in favor of recall. And really the point of this is it's not meant to be, I think there's concern about this being used as a tool for harassment, and for it to be sort of this issue on which people can legitimately feel different ways. But that's not the point of this. This is really meant to be a good governance mechanism where the action has to be so egregious that really it's very clear what is going on, and whether or not it's legitimately a reason for a recall. Because otherwise, unless an officer, a town officer resigns, we have no mechanism to remove them from office. So
Okay,
that's the end of my presentation. Let me stop sharing.
Before you go on, let me just make a note or note that this is a public hearing. So after the presentation and select board members' questions, we'll open up to the public. I apologize for not mentioning that at the beginning. Okay, go ahead.
Mariah, that higher bar that you set there, where does that stack up against other communities, maybe in the Commonwealth, that have recall provisions?
So the 20%, so it's interesting because John actually found some really helpful, I had been trying to get data from the Mass Municipal Association and I couldn't get it because of everything going on with COVID. But the 20% threshold is on the relatively low end. Well, it's about average, but there are some communities that require much higher. I should say that. Most of them are about 20%. And the 2/3 is not a standard mechanism. On the other hand, there was discussion on the listserv, on the town meeting listserv about for the public to overturn a town meeting action requires a 2/3 vote of the public. And I reflected on that and thought, you know, this is something that it's reasonable to me, is it should be a clear-cut case of malfeasance for there to be an action. So that's where the 2/3 and the 20% came from.
I'm thinking about you know, I guess what is clear cut depends on who you are. I'm thinking about the case in Fall River where some would argue that it was the infractions there were beyond clear cut, and yet and still in their recall process, as you point out in the discussion in your warrant article, the mayor there was actually returned to office even though more people voted.
Yeah, but that's not what happened. They voted him out, but then they voted him back in again because they split the vote. And the way that this warrant article is drafted, we couldn't have that happen because you can't appear on the ballot as a candidate. You can only appear for recall, but you can't be on that same ballot as a candidate.
Right, and I understand that. That's what I was just explaining. But say there is that while you know what people decide is clear cut can be very different, and so I'm a little, you know, 2/3 is a high bar. We know that, and I was sort of inclined to support the original version. This one, we just saw it, so I'm gonna have to think some more about it.
And I will say that that's been an ongoing conversation too. And some people think, well, you know, you should have to be, what does just cause mean and how do you define it? I think is a very gray area. Some people say, well, convicted of a felony, well, that might take much longer than being actually going through your whole term of office. An indictment is not actually guilty, right? You're not guilty until convicted. So there's a whole bunch of questions here.
Okay, so John, did you want to add something?
I did, thank you. And more than anything, I want to thank Mariah for the attentiveness to, you know, the many questions that arose at the time of her earlier presentations of this. And, you know, I admit I had a few questions, and so I'm delighted she's taken a couple of suggestions, and I just want to sort of say in favor of the changes that she has made to this, that recall is a funny kind of a thing. If there is a true sort of feeling and a strong feeling that a person has neglected or maybe even abused their office, I think the vote will be overwhelming. And I think that's the way it should be. You want this to be a tool that is useful in those rare instances where someone is just unfortunately guilty of gross malfeasance in office. You don't want it to be a tool for people to relitigate the prior election or to relitigate, you know, because of a defeat of a question at town meeting, you name it. And so that's why thresholds are key to this. And I appreciate very much that she has adopted threshold language, and I think, you know, rather strong threshold language. And I know that Neil Gordon is one of the people that has been most active in raising the question of how we can make sure that these recalls are actually tied to, specific sort of recitation of the causes for the recall to be conducted, so that it's not just arbitrary or just, whenever people feel like, getting involved in using a recall campaign for basically the purposes of drawing attention to an issue. We want to be sure that there are grounds, and I'm going to be interested in hearing Neil Gordon's response to how you frame that. But I think it's hugely improved, and I think in the end we could get something that could prove very useful to Brookline out of this.
Okay, as I said, this is a public hearing. Devin, is there anyone interested in speaking to this?
Yes, the first person signed up for public comment in this hearing is Neil Gordon.
Oh, great. He can answer some questions for us.
Neil has been promoted to a panelist, and your time will begin whenever you're ready. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable.
Thank you. I'm going to hold back the video and try and preserve some bandwidth. I am Neil Gordon. I'm a Precinct 1 town meeting member and a member of the advisory committee. So quoting from the warrant article description as provided by the petitioner, I'm going to quote, "This mechanism is intended for use in only the most grievous of circumstances," unquote. Yet the article itself sets no such criteria. Petitioner in her public comments in support of the article cites grievous examples, yet the article itself sets no such criteria. In fact, the article as printed in the warrant sets no criteria at all for recall. So let's not confuse a high bar in the form of a significant number of signatures on a recall petition or percentage of vote with criteria for recall. Signatures can be gathered for political purposes having little or nothing to do with malfeasance or misfeasance, grievous or otherwise, by an elected official. And I'd like to cite as an example the recent Mass 4 congressional race. Let's pretend for a minute that that was a town election subject to this proposed bylaw. The winner by plurality received about 23% of the vote. The losers, by most accounts splitting their presumed more progressive vote, received the balance, about 77%. The lack of any criteria would allow for the recall of the winner with sufficient petition signatures, allowing the remaining losing candidates a shot at a new election, one in which the winner of the original election would be barred. It's ranked choice voting in reverse. You got 23%, you finished first. We had a sufficient number of signatures, 50% vote you out, and now everyone who is second and lower is running. Are there grievous circumstances which should be grounds for recall? I suppose so. And perhaps an amendment to Article 16 could identify some specific circumstances that reach that level of cause that are not recall for no cause or for political cause or just because we don't like you and we think we can gather a sufficient number of signatures to overturn the will of the voters. Absent such specifics, which we're working on, and I think we can get there, but absent those specifics, I would ask for a recommendation of no action on Article 16. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be voting on this and the other warrant articles at a future meeting. So I believe all these probably be voted at a future meeting. So any motion for no action will be then. Any other comments from the public, Devin?
At this time, there are 19 attendees in the meeting, and no one has indicated using the hand raise feature or Q&A that they'd like to make a comment during the hearing.
Okay. I close the meeting on warrant article 16. Next, warrant article 17, election day signs.
Am I allowed to make closing statement or no?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to check. Just to respond to this comment of grievous, the issue is what is one person's definition of grievous or just cause is not necessarily another person's. And when this came up at advisory, I referred back to the resolution that town meeting approved overwhelmingly. I think it was like 158-2 on the resolution regarding President Trump and the emoluments, which some people would say was grievous and some people would say was politics and harassment. And so the definition of these things can be very difficult to nail down using some of these words. And likely, as in the case of the Mass 4 election, we might not have, even having some of these terms in place wouldn't necessarily solve this. I think that, as in many things, there is a sense of having to put high bars in and accept the common sense of the voter, which ultimately all of democracy, for better or for worse, relies upon to achieve the goals of the warrant article. That's my closing comment.
Thank you. Any final closing comments from the board?
Yeah, just I'll say one quick thing. Maybe you'll do what you do, but like maybe just throw out the word grievous altogether, because I think that's what folks are going to quibble over, and just say, clearly if you do maintain the 2/3, clearly and an overwhelming majority of people, at least who showed up at that election or at that recall election, have decided that this person, they believe at least that this person is not fit for office for whatever reason, and maybe maybe we'll quibble less if we don't have that word in there. But again,
it's not in there now, just to be clear. They want me to add something like that in, and I just don't think it makes any sort of positive contribution to the warrant article. I agree with you.
We agree with each other.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other comments from the board?
I'll just say hopefully one quick thing as well. I remember encountering a friend who lives in a different town who was actually running for select board looking for advice because there was a recall election going on in her community. And, she told me the circumstances, and I just really couldn't believe what I was hearing, and finding out that we don't actually have that mechanism right now in our community. I'm surprised, actually.
Was it Kingston? Is your friend in Kingston?
I'm not at liberty to discuss.
Okay.
No, it was not that community.
Okay.
But I encourage people to Google recall elections in Massachusetts. You will be shocked at things that have happened as recently as 6 months ago. So all of this to say, I think this is a step towards, transparency, accountability. I like the thresholds. I think that is also a step in the right direction, that it really should be a supermajority, so that there is really no wiggle room about how the voters at large feel about whatever issue is presented.
Thank you. Okay, I'll close the hearing on warrant article 16, and we'll move to warrant article 17, election day signs. I think we're going to hear back again from Neil Gordon. Is that right?
That's what I'm told. I'm ready.
And you're going to keep your video off. Thank you.
Yeah. Are you ready? I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Okay. For those tuning in late, I'm still Neil Gordon, town meeting member of Precinct 1 and a member of the advisory committee. Article 17, unlike Article 16, is about getting people into office rather than vice versa. So if you run for townwide office in Brookline or campaign in favor of or in opposition to a ballot question, you probably know the drill. And that's under cover of darkness on election eve, your allies scurry around from polling place to polling place with signs and staples and step stools and the like. And then the following morning, as the polls open, voters are greeted by this array of candidate and ballot question signs. And these signs in the aggregate say to us, this is what democracy looks like. It's common practice in Brookline for the polls to be dressed this way. It's also an illegal practice. It's common practice, but it's not legal. The sign bylaw is clear, quoting, "No person shall erect, display, or maintain a temporary or permanent sign upon any property owned by the town of Brookline or upon the public way of any other governmental body, unquote. There are no exceptions for the signs we see on election day. But on election day, by custom, those charged with enforcement have simply looked the other way. Ask the town clerk, and I have, what time on election eve can you put signs up? And he might say, I'm in bed by 9 p.m. He never tells you it's okay. We can't know what the next town clerk might say, and there is a better way. The proposed bylaw amendment codifies what's implicitly been allowed by custom. Signs of the size we're used to seeing, where we're used to seeing them, from sunset, or as amended by the advisory committee an hour before sunset, on the night before the election, until the polls close the following day. An amended bylaw will protect us against strict enforcement of the sign bylaw by elected officials, by overzealous town employees, or against demands for enforcement from members of the public, and especially demands that may be arbitrary or, in the face of a competitive campaign, partisan. I'll tell you that in support of a candidate several election cycles ago, I did receive that sheepish call from the town clerk that said, we received a complaint about your signs. They were up too early, by about 40 minutes too early. An amended bylaw will protect us from arbitrary grants of permission, implicit or explicit, by our government on days when we as citizens exercise a most fundamental and basic right. And yes, as some may point out, there's a risk that signs having nothing to do with elections might also be posted, because we can't limit viewpoint discrimination to only election-related signs. That happens to be true now. It would be selective enforcement to only take those down. As printed in the warrant, my article goes beyond the current custom and would allow signs to be displayed at schools and libraries, not polling places, a practice that some have argued might increase voter turnout, and then as the catch-all placeholder at any other place. But the advisory committee approved, and I support, an amended version that deletes those provisions. It primarily codifies, perhaps exclusively codifies, the status quo. And I'll add, there are no costs whatsoever associated with this bylaw change other than the cutting and pasting of the bylaw change. I will ask for a recommendation at a future meeting for favorable action on Article 17. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board? And again, this is a public hearing, and we'll open up to the public after receiving comments from the select board. Questions or comments?
Quick comment.
Sure.
I just want to say, on the subject of dressing polls, as they call it, no one does it better than Neil Gordon. No one knows this, what I think of as actually a pretty wonderful election eve routine. If you've never tried it, you have no idea what it's like to be dashing all over town in the dark of night, putting up signs on telephone poles from the top of a ladder.
I'm gonna take exception to being named number one, but I'm not going to name names for competitive reasons in future campaigns.
Yeah. I'm not aware of Neil Gordon ever doing that, but I hear someone is out there very enthusiastically putting up signs.
Aside from it's illegal, and I will not admit it, at least not in this forum.
When he first showed me how to do it, he never told me that it was an illegal activity. So I'm glad he's finally getting around to correcting that, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
Okay, well, and we deny that anything you just said is real, is true about Neil Gordon's activities. For the record,
I just want to comment. I do think that it's a good idea to have this in the bylaw, because it is custom. People expect it. I think people go to the polls looking for signs and trying to understand who's running. And, I think it is a way of community engagement and and notifying people of who's on the ballot. So I'm all for it. And, thank you, Neil, for doing it. And thank you for all your non-sign work.
You're quite welcome. And if I might give one shout out to legalization, I drafted this warrant article to the current custom, pretty much literally to the current custom. But I want to thank Paul Warren, who recognized that because this is currently illegal, we do it in dark of night. I set sunset, and he proposed an amendment, a good amendment, which the advisory committee adopted an hour before sunset. It's just a tad safer to be out when people can see you doing this nefarious work that we currently do in dark of night. So thank you.
I'd be fine if it was earlier even. I think you're right, especially folks that are running elections have a lot to do, and the more time they get to be able to do these things, one of the things that we do, there's a saying that's signs don't vote, and there's not a whole lot of science that supports the idea that lawn signs or other signs get more people to vote for you than the others, but some things are just tradition. We do them, maybe they make us feel good as we're going toward election day or whatever it is. What I do think that this needs to be accompanied by is education, and not specifically around dressing of the polls, but about signage in general, is enforcement. I think this past year was a pretty sloppy election, and I don't know how many fingers I'd need to count the number of signs I saw on public property, on places where certainly you and I know they didn't belong. Neil, you have a keen eye for this stuff. I'm sure you saw them too. But I think that education, when candidates are running for office, that they be very clearly and explicitly told what the rules are around signage around town. I don't know if that's been happening, at least not well enough. And then I'm not really sure what the enforcement mechanism other than the town clerk calling a candidate when they get a complaint.
Okay, and I had a note in my copy of this about removal of signs, but I think that language about signs being considered abandoned after a certain period of time means that DPW or someone can come around and remove them, which addresses the issue of signs for commercial products that are slipped in under this bylaw provision. Would that be an accurate way of looking at it?
So current practice, when DPW comes around to the polls as they close, they remove the 150-foot markers that the clerk's office puts out, or DPW puts out for the town clerk. And at the same time, they waste no time in taking those signs down at the polls. Candidates that plan on using them again typically need to scurry quickly and have their allies out harvesting back those signs, or they disappear. That's the current practice.
Okay, great.
DPW pulls them down.
Okay, any other questions or comments or statements? No, this is a public hearing. Devin, is anyone in the queue to make a public comment?
This time there are 18 attendees and no one has used the hand raise feature or Q&A to indicate they'd like to make a comment in the public hearing.
Okay, so unless someone on the select board has further comment, I will close the hearing and move on to the next warrant article. Any comments? Okay, hearing is hereby closed. And next we're going to look at warrant article 18, ranked choice voting. And who do we have to discuss this? Again, a public hearing, and I'm sure we'll have some comment from the public on this one.
Bernard, I think you might be looking at an outdated agenda.
Okay, so okay, so what's next?
19 and 20.
Okay. Oh, this is gonna cause a little bit of controversy. Warrant Article 19 and 20, let's take them together. A joint hearing. First, Warrant Article 19, change the town clerk from an elected to an appointed office. And Warrant Article 20, make appropriate bylaw changes to reflect that. Who do we have to talk about that?
I'm happy to do that. I know that Mel has this interest in this as well. Mel, do you want to take the lead on this?
No, go ahead, John.
Thank you. Well, let's just talk about the recent election that we had and the election we have coming up. I think people need to realize something about the election that we had in June. That was the first election Brookline has ever had to conduct during a pandemic, at least in our time, and the first conducted by mail. And those two facts put extraordinary pressure on our ability to actually make the election come off and come off successfully. And I think that there's perhaps a lot of people who are looking at these two articles and asking themselves, what are the reasons to move from having a town clerk who is elected to having a town clerk who is appointed? The one mistake they should not make is to say to themselves, well, gee, even though our town clerk has been unfortunately medically indisposed for nearly the entire year, 2020, we somehow got through that election. So, maybe we don't really have that difficult a situation whenever there's a medical indisposition of the serving town clerk. The fact of the matter is, we got through the election because essentially, in a sort of de facto way, we did what these two articles call for. The fellow who came into Brookline to help us get through this, Jeff Nutting, was appointed by Mel. And what would be accomplished under these two articles is that in the future, the town clerk, just like every other key department head in the town, would be appointed by our town administrator, Mel, or whoever is Mel's successor.
Subject to approval by the board.
Subject to approval by the board. And just as it was essential for the conducting of this election in June and for the conducting of the election coming up on November 3rd, that we bring in someone to basically rescue a desperate situation that was caused by a medical indisposition of the town clerk. We need to be able to do the same for all time. We can't afford a year in which the town clerk's office is not performing its duties. And in order for us to make sure that we don't ever have such a year, we really should transition to the very sensible method of choosing a town clerk, choosing a essential department head that we have in effect for every other department head. And that is to have the department head, the town clerk in this instance, appointed by the town administrator, who will hire a person who is not only professionally qualified and qualified by experience, but who is the best of the candidates available for the position. We've been lucky with the town clerks we've had, and I include Pat Ward very much in that description. But there is nothing in the way that we now, on a regular basis, choose our town clerk that guarantees that we will get someone who is professionally qualified. And what we have had over a succession of years is, by good fortune, we've had town clerks who could do the job, but it's too high a risk to take to assume we'll have that kind of success going forward. And even if we were to be that lucky that the person who stands for election and who's elected is always qualified, we would still have the problem that we faced this past year of there being no recourse when there's a medical indisposition of the town clerk, other than to basically take over the functions of the town clerk with a ad hoc last minute appointment of someone to get us through the duties, in this case of an election. And so that's the major thrust of these articles.
Okay, Mr. Kleckner, want to add anything?
I would. First of all, I want to say I keep turning my video off because I have a problem with my sensor and the light keeps going off and putting me in the dark here. So if that happens again, I'm going to turn my video off. But I would just say a couple things. First of all, understand that this is a two-step process. So in order to achieve the conversion of the town clerk from an elective to appointed, it requires a town meeting vote and a vote of the town at an annual town election. And effectively, this can only happen every third year because if you do it during the term of an appointment or term of someone's election, it's grandfathered. So really, it only can take effect on the third year when that term of appointment of the town clerk is expiring. And as Mr. Von Skoyak has said, our current town clerk, Mr. Ward, has been on a medical leave, and it's unlikely that he will be seeking a re-election at this time. So really, it is the timing that works for this. In terms of the merits of it, I believe that this is the only working department head position that's elected in the town. There are no other elected positions. Municipal government is very complicated, and there's a lot of work that it evolves. I think in particular, where I see the town clerk's office going in the future is helping the town with its communication engagement strategy, working on the website, all the public facing things that people in the community rely on for the town clerk, in addition to voting and vital statistics and licensing and things like that. So I really do see an opportunity for the town clerk's office to become more integrated into the town's management structure and providing more value. And I believe that can happen if it's an appointed position. Of course, we've had some very, very good town clerks in our tenure, and this is nothing against them, but I think this is an opportunity for us to try to seek changing this position once and for all. And other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So any questions from the board?
I just had
Comments?
Mine's a quick one, so I'll try to be quick. I have comments later, but do we know how many of the town clerks in Massachusetts are appointed versus elected currently?
That was my exact question.
Sorry.
Well, towns, so we're the largest town. I was just driving through central Massachusetts the other day where there's towns of 600 and 500. And so, I think we have to compare ourselves with our peers as opposed to really small towns where, so we'll do that. It's all over the place. But, what I think I will try to do is give you what I consider to be those communities that because of size and some geography and other factors are more like us, and I will provide that. I think it's a mixed bag. Be honest. I think that there are elected clerks around us, even in towns, and there are many that are appointed as well. I came from the town before I came to Brookline. I came from the town of Winchester, where the town clerk was appointed. In other towns I've been, it's been elected.
I'll just say briefly, this is one where I get the issues, and I'm not exactly sure what I think about this one. You never want to say that too often, because then everyone emails you and calls you to tell you what they think about it. But I'm curious to hear the debate at town meeting, and also the understanding is moving this forward is giving the voters a choice to decide whether or not they want to retain the elected town clerk or go to an appointed one. So I'm inclined to just move this forward to be able to give the voters an option here. I'll stop there.
I'd like to say that I think this makes sense. It's a much more complicated situation now than it used to be. There are many more requirements for the town clerk. There are in the elections, clearly it's a changing landscape, and I think that it would be great to have someone, and we don't know who we'll get. If it's not Pat Ward, who will it be? It could be anybody who's not trained, who doesn't have the qualifications, etc. So I think we're better off having the certainty of someone who is thoroughly vetted by our professional staff and has the kind of qualifications we need to run a very professional office. So I'm in favor of this, and I thank you for bringing it forward, Tom, as well as others, and Mel too. I know you've been concerned about it, and I think that rightly so.
Thank you, Nancy. And I also want to thank Raul, because he reminded me in classic fashion, I forgot what is probably the strongest argument on this, which is this is voter choice. There's going to be a difference of opinion at town meeting on this. There's going to be people who strongly disagree with this, and they're going to make their case. But the odd thing about it is anyone making the case that we should stick with an elected town clerk because there is something sacred about the right of voters to choose will have to explain, then why would you oppose putting this on the ballot so that voters can choose on this question? That is what this, we're not asking town meeting to settle this. We're asking town meeting to allow the voters to settle this. And I don't think that, I think it's going to be hard for town meeting members to justify denying voters the chance to settle this, especially when it's one of the key things at stake is the ability to conduct elections. I'm going to have to pick up that phone, but that's
okay. This is a public hearing. Why don't we go to the public and see if there are any comments? Devin, do we have anyone in the queue?
At this time, there are 19 attendees, and no one has used the hand raise feature or Q&A to indicate they'd like to make a comment during the public hearing.
Wow, I thought there would be at least one or two.
I actually had a comment that I would like to make.
Okay, Ms. Hamilton.
So prior to COVID, I probably would have been one of those people that said, this is sacred. I am uncomfortable with changing it. And I come at it now with two different lenses. Certainly a voter who believes in, the democratic way, but also as a candidate who not only ran for a local office here in Brookline during COVID, but also a county-wide race trying to get on the ballot when a lot of things were in flux. And I had to submit signatures to about 10 to 12 different towns to get on the ballot. And it was very interesting, the different experiences going to those towns, with some of them with elected town clerks and some of them with appointed town clerks. And I'll just say that a pattern emerged as to the professionalism, the amount of information that they had at their fingertips, how long it took them to get back to me with people who were appointed as opposed to elected. So I am on board with this proposal, especially with the with the fact that it will go before the voters before the town.
Okay. Devin, anyone else in the queue or anyone come into the queue?
We now have 20 attendees. I'm taking my time, and no one has used the Q&A feature or hand raise feature to indicate that they'd like to make a comment during the public hearing. Okay, so unless any select board member has anything else to say, I'd like to close the hearing. Anything from the select board? No, I'll just add one thing. I mean, Brookline is large enough and attractive enough town to really attract top quality people to an appointed town clerk position. And we could probably find, incredible people to take this position if this passes and the voters decide to approve it. So that's my 2 cents. Okay, so let's move on to the next item, which is also a public hearing. Okay, an inflammables license, which is a required license for the storage of flammable materials, in this case, propane, to be used on a temporary basis for housing during the time that there's construction in the area. Is there anyone, Mr. Sullivan or Chief Sullivan, would you like to present this, bring us up to date?
Sure. So
or is there someone else? I just saw you there. I know you're the expert in this area.
No, that's perfectly fine. We have Mr. DeLeo and Andy Martineau from Chestnut Hill Realty as well. And Mr. DeLeo is the propane proprietor. But I'll just say this, that the fire department has reviewed this application, and we find it to be necessary for the ongoing construction that's continuing at the Hancock Village properties. Essentially, what this allows the folks there to do is to provide heat and hot water and the fuel for cooking to properties that are currently occupied and are using natural gas, while construction is underway to relieve the main, change the main and the distribution lines for the newer buildings that are going to be in place in that area. So it's a temporary way of them providing gas using existing equipment. They'll have to be converted from natural gas to propane, but then eventually it will be converted back to natural gas when the construction is completed. And we have no issue with the installation at this time.
Could you give us a sense of the type of safety precautions that you require for a propane shack like this?
Sure.
I mean, as I understand, it's not a shack, but a building, and the propane tanks are inside the building. So what type of safety requirements do you impose?
So the requirements for the building fall under the building code, but I can assure you that the Fire Prevention Bureau and the buildings department director, Mr. Bennett, have reviewed the existing laws, and the proposed installation, temporary installation, meets all of those requirements.
I mean, is there any fire department requirements with respect to the type of lines, where they go, how they're protected, what the materials are made out of?
I'm going to ask Mr. DeLeo, who's the, or Mr. Martineau, to answer the question. The actual lines and so on and so forth fall under the plumbing code. There's a bunch of us that are involved in this, and that's not my bailiwick, but I know that the different departments have reviewed the plan and have approved the plan. So I'll ask Paul to perhaps elucidate.
Yeah, no, I assume that all these plans have been properly reviewed. My question really has to do with, tell us so that we can tell, the community, how careful you've been in ensuring that there are no safety issues at this site. So, Mr. DeLeo?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Paul DeLeo. I'm the owner of DeLeo Gas. We're headquartered up in Worcester, Massachusetts. We've done the install of the two 1,000-gallon tanks. They've both been approved by the fire department and the plumbing department. By NFPA code, the tanks need to be at least 25 feet away from any structure or building. So those tanks are a minimum of 25 feet off the building. And it was required from the fire department to put CO detectors and propane monitors inside the building. So if there was any type of leak, the residents would be obviously alarmed instantly. As far as the materials go, the tanks are put on large precast cement pads, so there will be no shifting, or the tanks are very stabilized. Chestnut Realty Group has done a good job prepping the site, making sure that that area is stabilized. And in terms of the gas piping, it is steel black iron pipe that has been run from the tanks to the side of the building where the existing natural gas main line was coming up. That has been run through the plumbing department and approved through the plumbing department in terms of the plumbing code. And Chestnut Realty Group has done a good job in regards to trying to hide the tanks as much as possible to the residents in that area. They ended up putting up a large privacy wooden fence around the tanks, so the residents, it's not an eyesore, so they're not staring at tanks in their backyard. So they've kind of, in my opinion, gone above and beyond in that aspect. And we've done a good job of signage on all areas of the fencing. So if there was an emergency, it is labeled propane. It is a non-smoking area. We have large non-smoking signs located on each side of the fences. So in my opinion, it's very labeled correctly, and the install is done up to code. And we feel safe in the sense of the install, and as a business owner and the owner of the business, confident in the install that we've done over there.
Great. Thank you. That's important information. Any other questions from the select board?
Sure, I'll try to be brief. This is, I hope you understand, it's, we're all, weary about propane grills, right? And so when we hear 4,000, propane tanks, then we just ask these questions. We want to make sure that everybody's safe, and it's our job to ask these kinds of questions. So we know you're a professional and that you've done this many times before. So I guess just the two quick questions I had is, one, ever had any issues with these in other communities? And then the second question is, what's protecting these tanks from any kind of tampering, somebody tampering with them in any way? Are they, they locked up, those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've never necessarily had an issue in this type of scenario. We do a lot of temporary heat for new construction. This one is kind of, this isn't a common install by any means. It's not that common to do propane system like this, but it's the only way to satisfy the needs for Chestnut Hill Realty. And in regards of anyone tampering with the tanks, it is an enclosed wooden area with a lock on a gate. And for someone to physically go in there and tamper with it, they would need, specific tools to kind of start wrenching off pipe that's been installed. It's not like a kid can walk in there and turn a valve and cause a huge issue. So those issues have been addressed in regards to making sure that residents can't tamper with any of the systems.
Thank you.
Yep.
And by the way, I apologize. I'm not sure why I thought these propane tanks were in a building.
They're not.
They're outside, and good distance from buildings, but they do have fencing around them, and I assume some type of monitoring system, cameras or whatever. I hope they do. Anyway, any other questions from the board?
I'll just offer that, you know, in my experience as a firefighter and fire chief for many years, we've come across and dealt with a number of these installations, both permanent and temporary. You know, this is a very safe environment. As I said earlier, there are a number of different municipal departments that have to sign off on the installation and of these things, including the plumbing department, the building department, and the fire department. So there's a lot of checks and balances on the workmanship and on the installation of these, and we don't have any reservations about granting this.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Like I said, this is a public hearing, so let's see if anyone from the public has some questions or comments. Devin, do we have anyone?
This time there are 14 attendees, and I want to make clear panelists may see that C. Scott Ananian has his hand raised, but he would like to actually comment on the town clerk hearing, which closed right before this. So I don't know if the chair wants to entertain perhaps doing that later, but no one has indicated a comment for this public hearing.
Tell Scott, wait just a few seconds and then we'll let you make your comment. Okay, any other questions from the select board? Okay, thank you, everyone. I'll close the hearing and we'll move on to the next item, which is actually going back to the previous one. I think we've gotten a good sense of. Do
you want to vote? I'm
sorry, I'm about to vote. Gotten a good sense of, what's going on here. So I move approval of the application by Chestnut Hill Realty for the keeping, storage, and use of 4 1,000-gallon propane tanks at 136 Gary Road. All in favor, Ms. Heller? Ms. Heller? Okay, Ms. Hamilton, we'll come back to her. Looks like Ms. Hamilton said aye. Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanscoya?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
I'm conflicted about this because of the environmental impacts. I'll vote aye, but I'd rather not see this in the future. I'd rather see us go to some sort of solar systems instead of propane and gas. I'll vote aye.
Okay, and chair votes aye. Thank you. So, Devin, why don't you let Mr. Ananian in to have his say regarding the town clerk warrant article warrant article 19 and 20. You're muted. Okay.
So I'll be brief. I thank the chair for giving me time. I've been trying to juggle simultaneous hearings on both sides of it. It used to be upstairs and downstairs, and now it's just like 2 Zooms, zooming in and out. So I sent a long email to the TMMA list, and I had a nice back and forth with town council about the articles. The short summary is, I think if you do want an appointed clerk, there are 2 missing articles which need to be filed, and which have already been ruled out of scope by the moderator for the current articles. One is removing the appointed clerk from the list of voting members of town meeting, which is a bylaw amendment. And the other is an amendment to actually requires a home rule petition to amend Chapter 270 of the Act of 1985 to fix some issues relating to the town administrator and department head. A number of the places that talk about departments explicitly exclude the town clerk, and that language needs to be cleaned up. And that has some important implications in terms of the independence of the town clerk, and so the decisions about how the town clerk as a department head relate to the town administrator, I think, are important, and I think the town deserves to see what that language is before they vote on this. But regardless of whether you want an appointed or an elected clerk, and to be clear, I do prefer an elected clerk. I'd also like to see another warrant article, number 3, which amends our bylaws to remove the requirement that the clerk be a registered voter in Brookline. I think everyone agrees that we'd like to expand the pool of candidates for the clerk and make sure that we can get the highest quality candidate possible. And the straightforward way to do that is to be able to look outside our town and hopefully attract them to move to our town if they were to win the position. Although, you know, some of our neighboring towns are quite nice as well. But the assistant clerk is exempt from those requirements. A temporary clerk, were you to appoint one, would be exempt from those requirements. I think that would be a worthwhile change to, you know, even if we were to appoint the clerk, to allow us to do a professional job search and draw from the widest possible area. I think, and that's, I'll just end by reminding the board that you have the ability right now already to appoint a temporary clerk for a period of your choosing towards between now and town meeting. And I'd like to hear from the select board at some point, if the select board votes to recommend an appointed position, why that is the right thing for May and not for right now. The way that the law works, if we wait until May, we have an election for the position, and then immediately we turn around and the duly elected clerk is replaced by the select board. And that leaves a bad taste in the mouth all around. I'd like to see that process of appointing a temporary clerk, which is what you can do with your powers right now, as a demonstration of how you think this is going to benefit the town. And of course, the appointed clerk would presumably have the benefits of incumbency if we did remain with an elected system. Anyway, that's my comments. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to talk to you, any of you, more about this online. Afterwards.
Okay. Any questions to Mr. Ananian from the select board?
I was just wondering if we can get maybe a memo or some kind of response from town council on the issues that's got raised.
I will
Okay.
make sure that happens.
Okay, so thank you, Scott. Next, also a public hearing. Scheduled for 8:15 is 9:14. We're not that late. Question of approving the application of an all alcohol package store license for Cereso Vino Brookline LLC, doing business as Cereso Market at 27 Harvard Street. The proposed manager of record, Nicholas Lesotho. Hours of operation will be Sunday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Is Mr. Lesotho here? Yes, I see he is. And Stephanie Boudreau, or Boudreau. Okay, tell us about this new venture. What are you doing? Are you already completed in construction? And you know, otherwise, tell us about this project. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, my computer just clicked on. We're not quite into the construction phase of anything yet. We have a LOI on the lease for the property at 27 Harvard Street, and the space is already built out. It was previously a wine shop and liquor store, so there's not too much to be done there outside of putting in new wood racking. And I do have a relationship with wineracks.com. So I do have some custom made wine racks that'll be coming in to the space. But more or less, I was just waiting for this approval and then the approval from the state, and then hoping to be open by November.
Okay. From what I understand, the police department has approved it. The building department says that they don't need to approve it because they have a right to open up a retail store at this site. Is that correct? Yeah.
That's correct. It's a by right for that particular land use. And as Mr. Lesotho mentioned, there was a package store there just previously.
Right. Okay. The fire department is waiting for construction to be completed, I guess, to make their review and or do their review and give approval. So. I guess, our approval should be conditioned on finalizing approvals from the fire department, but, we can go forward on that basis. Any questions from the select board? No? Okay. Okay, this is a public hearing. and the public has an opportunity to put in their say. Devin, do we have someone on the telephone line, it looks like?
Yes. Melinda Mann has signed up in advance to speak during the public hearing. Melinda, I have given you permission to unmute if you'd like to make your comment now. I'm going to click the ask to unmute button, and I believe if you are on your phone, you'll press the number 5. Or the number 9.
Evan, I think if she tries *6, she might have better luck.
Melinda, why don't you try? There we go. Nancy.
Does that work?
Yes,
Yep.
I hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Every system's different. My name's Melinda Mann. I live on Linden Street and I abut the rear of 27 Harvard Street. And my concern is, what are your plans for days and hours of deliveries of wine and liquor and everything else? Because that's basically right out my kitchen window.
Yes, go answer.
Certainly. Just typical business hours. So 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., nothing prior to that. And I'll be the one receiving. So I'll make sure all the purveyors are there after 10 a.m.
Okay. And then likewise on trash collection, are you using a commercial carter to take things out?
I don't have a specific trash vendor at the moment. I know Stephanie was speaking with Nick, the owner of the property, to finalize the trash arrangements, but I'll make sure that it's the same business hours for trash pickup.
Okay, I appreciate that, because some of the other businesses on Harvard Street, their trash collectors are there at 6 o'clock in the morning backing up. And in the summer with the windows open, I have to say, I'm not very happy about that. So if there's assurances that, deliveries and so forth are all during regular business hours, that's good to hear. And good luck with your business.
Thank you so much.
By the way, Ms. Mann, can I ask you a question? Did you have problems with the previous business at this location? I mean, other
No,
than
I
the problems you're having with the other businesses.
Yeah, no, they really weren't. And I think oftentimes some of their deliveries were made on Harvard Street rather than through the back. It's kind of a narrow driveway off of Harvard Street that goes behind the locksmith and some of the other businesses that face Harvard Street. So the deliveries and the trash weren't a problem with the prior, and I just wanted to make sure that continues.
Okay.
Certainly.
Is there anything we can do with respect to early morning deliveries to the other businesses? I just throw that out. She said that they come in early, they smell up the kitchen. Mr. Kleckner.
If there are licensed establishments by this board or another town entity, I suppose you could address that.
Yeah. Or maybe what is it, the building department or someone could just inquire as to whether they can fix any problems that neighbors are having.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we can, we can. If we can't, we can't. But
yeah, the biggest noise problem really are the private trash trucks that come in on some of the businesses, and they want to be in and out before there's traffic on the street. So they really, a lot of times, are there at 6:30 in the morning. And my understanding is the town really doesn't allow that until after 7 o'clock in the morning.
I believe that particular activity is regulated by the Public Works Department, and so I will follow up with them tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay.
So I think Stephanie was trying to weigh in. She said that the trash will be public trash with some private, but an effort will be made to make sure that it will be regular business hours.
Terrific. Thank you for that reassurance.
Great. Okay. Any other comments from the public, Devin?
At this time, there are 10 attendees and no one has used the hand raise feature or Q&A to indicate that they'd like to make a comment.
Okay, unless the select board has any comments or questions, I'd like to move on the vote.
Real quick,
Okay.
I just feel whenever in the current situation, we have someone come forward who's going to venture into opening something new in Brookline in this very difficult retail climate. We can, of course, we will make sure that all the rules and regulations are followed, but at the same time, I think we have to say thank you. And we have to say that we recognize that Brookline is so dependent on thriving retail. And my hat is off to this entrepreneur and all other entrepreneurs who are going to take the plunge at this time. And I hope people watching this and people around town will give this this business a visit and become hope maybe even become regular customers, because Brookline is going to be a great setting for retail in the future. But we have to kind of climb our way back. And it's because of entrepreneurs such as we have here tonight that I think we will climb our way back. And thank you.
So you probably have an advantage in that your business plan doesn't require indoor seating. Is that correct? So
that is correct.
You're not as affected by the COVID restrictions as some other businesses in the food area. I'm looking forward to trying some new Italian wines, and of course, any Italian cuisine pieces I'd be interested in trying too. So you're right down the street for me.
Fabulous.
Okay. Well, any other questions? Okay, I move that, or not move. I close the hearing, and I move that we approve the application of an all alcohol package store license for Cereso Market at 27 Harvard Street. And proposed manager of record, Nicholas Lesotho. Hours of operation, Sunday through Saturday, which means 7 days a week, I take it. 11:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. All in favor, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanscoya?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you, and welcome to Brookline Village.
Thank you. And thank you for the kind words. I very much appreciate it. And I very much look forward to being a part of the community.
Okay, great.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to just drink my old Trader Joe's wine tonight.
Soon, I hope.
Okay, anything else on the agenda? Nothing that I see. So unless anyone has anything else to say, I'll close the meeting and or close the discussion and end the meeting. Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.